Good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock, so let's make a start. Welcome to today's planning meeting of the 22nd of May. I would like to welcome members of the public, councillors and officers to this meeting, and I call upon the clerk who will advise how the meeting will be run this afternoon.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Please note that we're using hybrid meeting arrangements with registered speakers and councillors who are not members of the Planning Committee having the option to join the meeting via Zoom. We are also live streaming the meeting to encourage more people to engage in our public meetings. The proceedings of the meeting will be recorded. Please can I remind everyone to use their microphones when speaking and turn them off when you have finished. Please can attendees present in person refrain from watching the live stream, as this will cause interference for our viewers. In accordance with the Constitution, members of the public who have registered to speak will be permitted to do so when invited by the Chairman. I have confirmed those entitled to speak today. We are not expecting any fire alarm testing today. In the event of an evacuation, you will hear a recorded message requesting you to evacuate the building. Please leave via the nearest exit, which is behind you there, and we will assist you in leaving. Once outside, please assemble in front of the tennis courts, which are on the seaward side of the building. Please can you also ensure that your mobile phones and iPads and other devices are turned to silent. Each application will be dealt with in the following order. The Planning Officer will present the submitted report and will outline the proposed recommendation in full. Any speakers registered to speak on the application will be invited to address the committee in the following order. Speakers against, neighbourhood forum representatives, any councillors who are not members of the committee, followed by speakers in support of the application. All speakers will have a maximum of 5 minutes each to address the meeting. This will be followed by questions from members of the committee and responses from the Planning Officer. Once questions from the committee have concluded, the Chairman will open the application for debate. At the conclusion of the debate, the Chairman will seek a proposer and a seconder for the application. The proposal must be in full and include all information such as conditions or reasons. The Chairman will then confirm with the Planning Officer if they wish to enter into a period of summing up. Members, if at any point you leave the meeting during consideration of an application, you will be unable to vote on that application. Chairman, I now hand the meeting over to yourself.
Thank you. Clerk, are there any apologies or updates to the membership of the committee? Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chairman, we have apologies from Councillor Mandy Darling, who is represented by Councillor Steve Darling, just for the public to confirm the membership of the committee, because the members weren't known when we published the agenda. So the members for today are Councillors Billings, Joyce, Madison, Jackie Thomas, who's our chairwoman, and Tolchard, and then we've got Councillors Fox, Pentney and Cowell, with Councillor Steve Darling for Mandy Darling today.
Thank you. Minutes. To confirm as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of this committee held on the 13th of March 2023. Is there a proposer? Councillor Pentney, thank you. And a seconder, please. Down top. Thank you. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Declaration of interests. Do any members of the Planning Committee have any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests on any of the items on today's agenda? Please raise your hand. No. Do any officers have any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests on any of the items on today's agenda? No, thank you. Thank you very much. Moving on then to item 5, to consider an application for land at Preston Down Road, Paignton. The clerk has confirmed those who have registered to speak upon entry to the meeting. I will therefore ask Mr. Jim Blackwell to introduce the application. Thank you, Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you very much. So this is the application made by the TDA for construction of 101 dwellings, including a mix of 1, 2, 3 and 4 bedroom homes, 30 of those being affordable, whether new access to either side of Preston Down Road, landscaping, public open space, a play area, associated works on the two fields north and south of Preston Down Road, which you can see there dissected by the road, the sites to the north and to the south. So there are two parcels of land under one application. They're broadly rectangular, separated by Preston Down Road. Flood Zone 1, a triple SI, lies to the north, 125 metres away. The Oddicombe Wood Local Nature Reserve and the County Wildlife Site to the south. It's a mix of agricultural land, no longer to the north and south. The north is orientated east-west with gates. There's no footway currently on Preston Down Road. And a row of mature trees and hedgerows around the site, with the rear gardens at Templar Road to the east. On that boundary there are 5 TPO, so tree protection order trees, oak trees, with Sutton Seas to the north, and there are a number of below ground constraints, including a pressure gas main running west to east to the entrance of the site, also a sewer running diagonally across the field serving Torbay Coast and Countryside Trust. To the south is orientated north-south, the rectangle. It has a footway on Preston Down Road, with a footway separate, and to the east is Sangendham Drive. So in this plan you can see, in terms of context, where the site lies. You can see the wider area, so you can see the walking distance to local green space, the local centre to the east, and the extension, what would be that sort of urban finger that goes towards Oddicombe Farm, towards Malden. Here you can see the local plan key diagram identifying that area for development. Although the two sites I've said before isn't indicated in the local plan, they're identified as countryside. The land parcels are identified as key housing sites under policies SDP 3.1 and SS1 of the Paignton Neighbourhood Plan. The strategic housing land availability assessment and the housing economic land availability assessment describe it as an obvious choice for housing. It's also worth noting that the most recent assessment in 2022 identified the need for 721 homes a year. Here you can see the site boundaries, including the key trees, protection zones around those areas, particularly to the eastern boundaries of both sites, the countryside area to the north and east, and northeast and west. And you can also see the gas main, which is that dark colour which goes along the north side of Preston Down Road. You can also see the bus stops, which are in blue along that linear route. So here you can see the site block plan, which you can just about make out the entrances to the site. So not the gates that we entered from the east of each side of this morning's site visits, but the centre of the southern parcel and a third up Preston Down Road for the northern parcel. You can see the edges retained, the dark corridors and retained landscaping, just to enable dark corridors for protected species such as bats. There'll be no net loss in the quality of the habitats present on the site. It achieves 10% biodiversity net gain in accordance with the local plan, the MPPF. And you can see the layout here clearly for each plot. You can see the spaces between the dwellings, the garden sizes, and the comparison with the existing layout of Sangendham Drive and Templar Road. Here's the site section. You can see in the top image, you can see Preston Down Road in the centre. So they're not very clear from these small screens, but that's in the centre on the top slide. You can see Templar Road and Sangendham Drive to the right, and the high point is Preston Down Road. It's the same with the next image down, which is the site profile, which goes down to Templar Road on the right-hand side, and the one below is down to Sangendham Drive, just trying to make clear that topography plays a part in this scheme. So here's the proposed layout. You see the tight red boundary of the site. This is diagrammatical, but it helps clearly define the entrance to the sites. It shows where the garages are, the on-plot parking, visitor cycle stands to the north and to the south, and the amenity space, all of which comply with policy in the local plan. This is the proposed housing mix. You start to see the position for where the varying properties will go. So the planning policy team support the provision of the 30% housing on the site, affordable housing on the site. There is obviously a very pressing need for affordable housing in Torbay, And you can see the mix of tenures, so that's social rent, affordable rent, shared ownership. And you can also see the first home suggested. So that's in accordance with H2, which tries to avoid an over-concentration of deprivation. You can see on the southern site, possibly need to use this. It's very difficult to do this from this distance, but you can see the affordable housing is in this L shape here, and at the site entrance on the northern site, and then halfway down here in the southern site. And here you can see the scale and massing of the properties. So you can see the green is 2-storey, so predominantly 2-storey in the northern site with 2.5 stories on the entrance, and split level dwellings, which relate to the change in topography on the northern site. They're to the north of that. And then to the south, you've got the 2-storey properties as you entrance on the entrance, with bungalows to the right-hand side, and that drops down to split level dwellings on the south. This is much more granular in detail, but you start to see where the retained hedgerows are, new planting, retained trees. You can see the plot positions, the entry points, and the suds pond, which would be to the north. And that southern layout, you can see again the retained hedgerow, new tree planting, and that linear route that the highway takes down into the site with those spur cul-de-sac roads coming off it. And just looking at this plan again to show how the retained and new landscaping will be positioned. So you can see that important screen that goes along Preston Down Road, either side of the site, fronting the site, the boundaries to the east, particularly separating Sandringham Drive and Templar Road, will all retain and improve those hedgerow boundaries. And then just looking at street scenes, so you can see in the this is the northern site, so this is the road that will go along the north, and you can see the arc as it goes down towards the bottom of the site, and the street scene, which is characterised mostly by 2-storey properties. And then on the bottom one you can see again the northern site with the road in the centre, and then the properties descending down the hill. And the same here, you can see the suds pond on the top plan section. You can see the suds pond to the left-hand side, the highway coming through here. And on the lower plan, that's the southern site. And you can see Preston Down Road to the left as the site descends down with the split level properties at the bottom. And here again, this is the southern site. And you can see the properties going down with the bungalows and the split level properties to the bottom of the site. So those are street scenes that you'd see in the site section. Just running through the elevations now for each individual property type. So this is the elevations for one property type, the 3-bedroom property type, 3-bedroom again, 4-bedroom with the split level, 4-bedroom, 4-bedroom again, the bungalow design, and this property here, which is a 2-bedroom, three-person property. Here's the informal play, which is in the southern parcel. You can see it's naturalistic play, which has that link around the southern edge of the site, of the southern part of the site. You can also hear the artist's impression. So this is the entrance as you'd see it from Preston Down Road on the corner in the southern field. And this is an artist's perspective looking towards the southeast, so to orientate you a little bit, that's Preston Down Road running up the site like that. Just to be clear on landscape, this is the photo looking southeast, so you can see the telecommunications area here, Sutton Seeds on that southern edge, and Templar Road to the left-hand side of that image. And the photos now for those who couldn't make the site visit earlier, this is the photo looking east. So that's looking at that transition from the 30 mile an hour into the edge of Preston Down Road and the properties along Templar Road. The traffic order has been agreed as part of this, which we discussed at site. One of the key things was the ability of visibility and the speeds of vehicles coming into this area. So the TRO, the traffic regulation order, would move that 30-mile-an-hour position there, further back and over the hill, and include a crossing as well. This is the existing entrance to the northern parcel. This is a northern site looking northwest back towards where Sutton Seeds are, just over that boundary. This is the northern site looking east back towards Templar Road. The southern entrance to the site. The topography sloping down to the left with the existing property, just in the distance, which is accessed from Preston Down Road. Down into that site, looking south. Looking back at the existing property in the southern site. The view from the corner of the site looking southeast. The neighbourhood plan policies are pertinent for this application. Material issue considerations that you will see you have seen in the report. And the officer recommendation, which is completion of a satisfactory section 106 planning agreement of any necessary extensions to the determination period. The conditions as outlined, with the final drafting and conditions delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, and the resolution of any new material considerations that may come to light following Planning Committee to be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, including the addition of any necessary further planning conditions or obligations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. I now call on Councillor Barbara Lewis to address the meeting. If you'd like to take the table in front. You have 5 minutes and the clerk will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining. Thank you. In your own time.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I must admit it's very strange being on this side of the table after 8 years on that side. Today I'm speaking on behalf of the 3 Preston councillors, Councillors Chris Lewis, Dave Thomas and myself. We were delighted that this application has come forward with only 30% affordable housing. Many of you will know that the previous administration had wanted up to 70% affordable homes on this site, a position we thought was untenable, unworkable and certainly not viable for many reasons. We're pleased to see the site has come forward being policy compliant, and of course this helps all housing groups within the Bay, providing the following types of housing: social rented, affordable and part buy, part rental. We also believe that discussions should take place to take a larger land receipt and use the money to provide greater benefits to a wider audience. The site is a prime location in Preston with fantastic views over the bay. If we can achieve more money for the site and use it elsewhere, we could provide many more affordable homes, so therefore helping even more residents most in need. Generally getting more beds for your bucks. Our objective is to help those in need. Preston Down Road is a project that can deliver that. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. I now call Ed Brown to address the meeting in support of the application. Mr. Brown, if you'd like to come forward to the table. You have 5 minutes and the clerk will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Ed from TDA. TDA has submitted the planning application on behalf of Tor Vista Homes for 101 homes at Preston Down Road. As part of the evolution of the scheme, consultation has been carried out with members of the public, the planning officer and consultees to the planning process prior to the submission of the planning application to help shape the proposals. The planning application has been submitted to be planning policy compliant. Planning policy requires 30% affordable housing split equally across social rent, affordable rent and shared ownership tenures, which has been provided. The dwelling mix, as proposed, ranges between 1-bed accessible ground floor flats for wheelchair users, 2-bed flats, 2, 3 and 4 bedroom houses and 3-bed bungalows. The bungalows will be M42 building regulation will meet M42 building regulation requirements, being designed so that they're more easily accessed and adapted should the need arise for future wheelchair use. The proposed scheme, as submitted, seeks consent for 35 4-bed houses, 41 3-bed houses, 6 3-bed bungalows, 11 2-bed houses, 5 2-bed flats, and 3 1-bed flats. From the overall mix, 30% affordable homes consists of 6 4-bedroom houses, 14 3-bedroom houses, 3 2-bed houses, 4 2-bed flats, and 3 1-bed flats. A variety of open market and affordable houses are proposed at the site to cater for a number of individuals, couples, and families. Torbay Council unfortunately cannot demonstrate a 3 or 5 year housing land supply. The provision of 101 houses will make a meaningful contribution towards meeting the housing supply and could discourage other sites that are less suitable coming forward. Planning policy requires 2 parking spaces per house and 1 parking space per flat to be provided. An over-provision of parking spaces has been provided. The layout provides 223 parking spaces. Torbay Council also has a suggested minimum garden size of 55 square metres per house, which has been provided or exceeded. Cycle parking will also be provided as required through planning policy. Pre-application advice has been sought with South West Water in relation to surface water and foul drainage, with a scheme being designed accordingly. South West Water and the Environment Agency raised no objections. Public open space is provided on site with links to the wider countryside provided to improve connectivity and well-being. 10% plus biodiversity net gain has been achieved through the design layout. The Devon County ecologist and Natural England are satisfied with the dark bat corridor, which provides a buffer in between the existing hedgerows on the site boundaries and the proposed housing. Another benefit of the dark corridor is that the proposed housing is set back from existing housing to provide acceptable distances between existing and proposed housing, as well as providing acceptable ecology mitigation. The Tree and Landscape Officer has raised no objection. Pre-application discussions were held where the majority of trees are being retained with the exception of diseased or dying trees, where proposals seek to replace these trees with native species. The diseased and dying trees have acted as a landscape screen on the northern boundary of the northern field, but this screening will diminish in the future as some of the trees die. The replacement planting will provide landscape screening in the long term. In consideration of low carbon development, planning policy requires every house and 20% of the flats to be provided with an electric charging point for a vehicle. All houses and all flats will be provided with an electric charging point. The building fabric will be designed to minimise and reduce energy use through a fabric-first approach. Low energy lighting and appliances will help reduce energy use, with low water use fittings used in each plot to reduce water usage. The site has been earmarked for residential development in the future in the local plan and neighbourhood plan, being within a sustainable location on the edge of the built environment. I'd like to thank you all for listening to me. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. If you'd like to retake your seat. So, committee members, I will now invite questions to the planning officer. Please may I remind members questions should only cover matters not raised in the presentation. Are there any members wishing to ask a question? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Paignton, if you'd like to go first.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. Was the reduction from 70% to 30% affordable housing one required to make this compliant with planning policy as per your recommendation?
The application has always been 30%, so 30 dwellings as part of this application since it started.
No, I'll pass for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Paignton. Councillor Darling, I believe you have a question.
Thank you. And my question is in respect of land supply. I do, as a retread member to the planning committee, I'd want some clarification. We heard from the office about the need to, because we're short of land supply, that we need to feed that beast. And yet, when I listen to the political programmes at the weekend, it's talking about that the government have removed the target figures from members. So I'm sure I'm not the only one who gets very confused as to what the Conservative government are doing nationally. Can I have some advice for this? And then I've got a follow-up question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I can come in, it is a period of huge uncertainty in terms of government advice and guidance on what will be the housing figures. It does seem as if the current target levels have been scrapped for local authorities, but we will get the new levelling up bill in the summer at some point, which will lay out some details, and the revised MPPF, which will also lay out some detail. But at the moment, it's true, the comment that was made earlier that we do not have a 3-year housing land supply. We are beneath that, and therefore housing sites are precious, and we want to see them come forward. So from that point of view, I won't get into the political side of it, but there is still quite a bit of uncertainty as to what local authorities will be required to do, and I'm sure we'll be having that debate with the local plan update as well at some point.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, this isn't the second question I got. So what weight should we apply to the lack of housing in the system coming through? Because saying we're confused by what the Tory government are telling us what to do around planning is confusing then further to members as what weight should we apply to the need to feed the beast of land supply? Is it how much of a consideration should it be, or is it just complete confusion from Whitehall?
No, not confusion, but if the question is making the best use of available land, which has always been the advice from whatever government, then we have to look at densities, and we have to look at what densities are applicable to particular parts of the bay and particular sites. And the layout and density is seen to be appropriate for this site with the number of units, and we wouldn't want to see that increase because of the ecological issues and the balance on the site. So that figure of the number of units is reasonable for this site, and we're not looking to up that in any way. So.
Thank you. I skillfully avoided my question about land supply. My second question that I wanted to seek clarification on was I'm concerned that there was misrepresentation, Chair, from the presentation from Councillor B. Lewis, because it was up to 70 affordable percentage of, it was between 50 and 70% that we were looking at as far as cabinet. When we had a meeting at 5:30 in the afternoon, and it was full of members of the public, and yet there are many less here at 2 o'clock on the afternoon. But I'll just
Councillor Darling, is this a question or
it is a question, Councillor Jackie Thomas. It is. So the question is, with our desperate need for affordable housing that we have in Torbay, the issue, Councillor Thomas, to me, is if we've got land here, surely we should be putting it to good use rather than putting it in our back pocket, some money in our back pocket and hoping that we would get it. What would officers' advice be around providing affordable housing? Is cash or land more important? And then I've got a further question from that.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, I'm conscious this might be more applicable for the debate because putting officers on the point of questioning whether or not a political decision may be made by the new administration about what we do with this portion of land is a little bit awkward. But from a planning point of view, we would be always seeking to try and get the most affordable housing we can from any site, within reason, to make sure it's a mixed community and it's a balanced community. But our current policy talks about 30%. The applicants have made it based on 30%, and that's what's in front of us today. The decision about what we do with this site afterwards is still within the control of the council in terms of its sale or development.
Thank you. So building on that response, if I may, Councillor Thomas, so in light of this, is it reasonable for members to be able to say that we would like a minimum of 50% affordable housing from this application? Is that a reasonable condition for us to put on this particular application, Mr Edmondson?
Mr Edmondson, do you want to do a follow-up to that?
So, Madam Chairman, the application is policy compliant, and so there would be need for some justification to depart from the policy, which requires 30%.
And so to build on that, if I may, so the fact that there was a cross-party declaration of a housing crisis in Torbay, would that be reasonable justification? The fact that we have over 1,500 people on the waiting list for affordable housing in Torbay, and that we have over 150 households in temporary accommodation, would that be justification of being a bit broad with our proposals?
Madam Chairman, I think the issues surrounding the need for affordable housing were dealt with when the policy was made. And this is the same as any other application as far as I can see in terms of it being residential development. I'm not sure that there are any special circumstances in relation to this application which would justify a departure from the policy which the Council has adopted.
Thank you very much. Councillor Billings, I believe you have a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions to follow up from the line of questioning we've just heard. First of all, officers, you were asked a specific question in relation to whether the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill was law. Could you clarify for me? I believe it's at the House of Lords stage now. Does that mean it's law, yes or no, please, as we currently speak for this meeting?
Well, Chair, it's a bill, so it's not law as we speak.
Thank you. So returning back to the question we were just asked, in terms of the need for to deliver housing in relation to the land supply that Torbay can or can't deliver, would I be correct to assume that current position is that Torbay needs to show a valid 5-year land supply, and at the moment it doesn't, so therefore there is a need to deliver housing? Would that be correct?
That would be a fair assertion, yes. We had a 3-year land supply based on the fact that we had neighbourhood plans in place that were up to date, but it's effectively 5 years until that law has changed.
Thank you, officers. I think that, that clarifies the confusion that was introduced by the last line of questioning on that point. Taking a couple of other questions I may have, if I may. Could you clarify for me when this application was submitted, please, in terms of the date?
July last year.
Okay. And at any stage has the affordable housing contribution changed?
The affordable housing contribution has been consistent with the pre-application advice which was given in 2021. So the sequence of events since then, from pre-application inquiry to this application, has always been 30%. That's correct.
That's helpful. And in relation to the last large housing application that this committee dealt with, I believe it was in relation to the reserved matters for Inglewood. I believe I'm right that this council requested from that developer 30% affordable housing. Could you refresh my memory whether that's actually correct or not, please, officers?
By the way, David's nodding. I'd say that's correct.
That's helpful. Thank you. So just returning to another point I had. On our site visit, we saw how the development was spread across 2 sides of the main Preston Down Road. Could you assist perhaps, please, Mr Blackwell, in highlighting whether there's any provision for a pedestrian access from one side to the other, and perhaps on screen show where that might be located?
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, the crossing would go, you've got the northern field here, the southern field here, entry point there, so it's just slightly along from the northern entry point here. It's an uncontrolled crossing with tactile paving, drop curb, and that will enable crossing between the 2 sites. And as background to that, we also mentioned on site about the TRO, the traffic regulation order, which will reduce speeds further up the hill to enable the speed to be dropped from 40 to 30.
Thank you. And final question, I promise. Condition 38 that you refer to in your report is in relation to the removal of the permitted development rights. Could you just talk to me a little bit about why you think in relation to this scheme you think that's appropriate?
I mentioned this earlier about the sequence of events since this application was put in, including the pre-application inquiry. We've always been really clear that this is a landscape-led approach, so a lot of work has gone into retaining the landscape, retaining trees, and as officers we felt that if there was permitted development rights, or a right of an owner of a household to extend their property in some way without buildings, we felt that would
undermine the landscape quality. So we've taken away those permitted development rights to protect the open landscape as much as we can.
Thank you very much. Does that answer your question, Councillor Billings?
It does, thank Madam Chair.
Councillor Pentney, I believe you had further questions. Thank you.
I did, but it's actually been covered by an answer Mr. Cattrall gave a couple of questions back, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions from members? Sorry, Councillor Cowell, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll probably say that a lot of my comments for the actual debate, because I think they are more of a debating policy challenge rather than whether it's currently compliant, because this scheme certainly is compliant to the letter of our local plan, MPPF, and Paignton Neighbourhood Plan. My direct question, though, is regarding the phasing of the affordable and the social rented homes in particular. Unless I've missed it in any of the documentation, when is it expected to deliver those much-needed affordable homes?
We have included a phasing plan, but there's no control over when those will be delivered. So that's something we debated on site during the visits. So if it's that something members thought needs some control, then we can obviously discuss that and how that mechanism would work.
Thanks, Jim. I certainly think that we need to be, and I apologise for not being on site this morning, but work commitments, I'm afraid. But that delivery of those phasing, I think, is critical. And unlike private developments, we are quite influential because we are effectively the developer and the landowner. So I think we need to be looking, with the support of Homes England, for the earliest delivery of those. And I think we should, if we can technically achieve it, apply that as a condition.
Through you, Madam Chair. Councillor Cowell, we also had a conversation about speeding up development and making sure development happens, which I know is a conversation we've had over the last few years. There is the opportunity as well, and I've mentioned this a few times, that we can put planning conditions on that shorten the time period for the start to take place, at least to show intent. So rather than the standard 3-year permission, we can put a shorter period on than that. And I've often talked about that. And as long as it's seen to be reasonable to do that, and we do have the control, as you say, because it's our site, it would make whoever's going to develop this site realise they've got to get going and at least get that start going within that 18-month probably period would be seen to be reasonable. And then with Jim's condition on the report about phasing, we'd also be able to set some targets there about when those affordable homes would be provided.
So, Madam Chair, based on Mr Edmondson's comments then in terms of ownership, if we were to flog it off, we wouldn't have that potential influence on the timing of delivery. So I know that that would be a decision taken outside of the planning committee's realm, would be a political decision made by the administration. But clearly that needs to be considered if we are going to apply those conditions. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cowell. I just have promotion. Thank you. Thank you, members. Are there any more questions for the officers on this application? Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So I now open the application for any debate. Thank you. Councillor Cowell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Clearly, Councillor Darling's previously referred to the options and opportunities for delivery of affordable housing. And because it is in the gift and the ownership of the council, it's one of the rare sites in Torbay where we do have control. I mean, if you look at so many of the other sites around the bay that have got below policy compliant affordable housing contributions, lack of delivery on those particular sites, and I can think of Devonshire Park and Oddicombe as two prime examples, that we should be working with other partners and indeed Homes England to maximise the contribution. And I know from our previous experience that we did indeed have very positive conversations around about increasing the level of affordable and social rent in particular, because affordable housing in Torbay is one thing, but it's affordable as a percentage of the market rent in Torbay, which is extremely high, as we know, whereas social rent is something completely different. So to be maximising, we're talking about just 10 properties, which is not going to make a significant contribution to adding to the woefully low 8% of social housing stock in Torbay. So I really think that we should be considering how we can maximise that contribution, particularly if it's a Tor Vista TDA Torbay Council project. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cow. Councillor Darling, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thank you. I was about to call you Madam Mayor. It's habit forming. Anyway, thank you, Chair. I reflect to myself, in respect of applications that have gone through that are above 30%, and that was quite a while ago. We're looking at Orchid Way up in Barton. That was a substantial scheme with significant numbers of affordable housing. Wembury Drive is another one, an extension to Wembury Drive, because I know officers were struggling to think of recent ones where that has been done. However, we know that in recent just before the previous administration, links had been broken with registered providers, and so perhaps they weren't coming along as swiftly as they ought to have been to try and tackle the housing crisis, Madam Chairman, as we do face in Torbay. And I would suggest the fact that the last meeting that discussed this, the last Cabinet meeting a few weeks ago, there is an exceptional circumstance, because we know that the register provided there was talking about between 50 and 70% affordable housing on this site being doable by them being able to bring in additional subsidy from sites elsewhere that they'd been developed. So I would suggest that that is a reasonable exceptional circumstance in light of our desperate need for affordable housing for local need, because really the biggest challenge that we face in finding sites for affordable housing is land in Torbay. It isn't finance so much, it's land is the crucial issue. And if we are, Madam Chairman, going to go kiss goodbye to some green fields, then we need to make sure that it brings home the bacon as far as that crisis that there is for affordable housing. So I would hope that we could give serious consideration to making a planning condition saying that there should be a minimum of affordable rented housing on this site to actually try and tackle some of that housing need that we know that there is in Torbay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Darling. Councillor Billings, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having had the benefit of looking around the site earlier today, there are a couple of things that, were I the applicant, I might have done differently with it. For example, the site, particularly to the southern side, has a most outstanding view in towards the bay that looks right across over to Brixham and Elbury. And I personally wasn't persuaded that the alignment of the road, for example, was the most optimal one to take advantage of this outstanding view. But correct me if I'm wrong, Chair. We're here to judge the application that's before us. We're not here to redesign the application. And what officers assisted me with earlier in the questions is that the application was submitted under the previous administration. It's been through the planning system. Due process has been followed, and the proportion of affordable housing is what the applicant, which ultimately is ourselves as a council, asked for. And that's what we're here to consider. And it seems to me somewhat surprising that we're considering redesigning the application on but one ground, when perhaps we might want to also redesign it on others. And I'm not convinced of the message that it sends to the development sector, that within Torbay we're reliant on bringing forward other housing, if at a committee stage very late in the day we change the benchmark as to how we're considering application. And I think there's a great weight that we should give to being consistent in the way we look at applications, and we should, notwithstanding the fact that through our company, the TDA, we're the applicant here, we should be looking at this in the same way that the council previously looked at the Inglewood development. And if we looked at it on that respect, we would be policy compliant. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Councillor Pentney, if you'd like to. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I got it right. Councillor Billings, you're right. We are here to deal with the application in front of us, and whatever we choose to do has to be based in the planning policies that inform our decisions. Where I differ in opinion from you is that it's not quite as black as white as you suggest. We have a job in interpreting a whole bunch of different planning policies that come from different sources. And yes, to the letter of the law, this application in front of us now is policy compliant in respect to affordable housing. But I think in the course of the debate, I'd like all members to consider the question raised by Councillor Steve Darling in terms of we do have to consider affordable housing in Torbay, and does this administration want the day one headline to read, Torbay turns its back on affordable housing at Preston Down Road? Well, this could be a missed opportunity. As you say, this is a greenfield site where we're the de facto applicant through the company. This is a supreme opportunity, and I'm not saying I'm there. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, because none of us should be predetermined. We should wait on the outcome of this debate. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet, but I don't think we should close down that line of thinking. If there is a way, which surely every member should agree with, if we can maximise affordable housing here at this committee meeting this afternoon, then absolutely we should. So I just ask members to consider that in the course of this debate. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pentney. Councillor Billings, I believe you're next.
Councillor Pentney, whilst I hear the point you've just made in relation to what I've said, what I'm unclear on as to why the way you're looking at this application is different compared to how the administration who brought forward the previous application looked at it when they brought forward what we're currently looking at. That's the bit I'm not clear on.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mike Fox, if you'd like to go next, please.
I think, Madam Chairman, got it right. Madam Chairman, that the land issue is absolutely critical, possibly more in Torbay than in many areas, because we have such a wonderful environmental backdrop to this area, and we've got the sea on one side, which somewhat precludes expansion. We are in a more difficult solution. Land, I think it was Mark Twain once said, invest in land, son, because he ain't making it anymore. And I think the land issue is critical. We own the land anyway. We can have the flexibility if we want as a council, if we had the political will to in fact drive the figure up. If it went up to about 50%, most of the research that I had to look at when I was an inspector would say that was fine. That wasn't going beyond, that wasn't over-egging the cake within this type of development. I think the design work for doing that could be minimal from the plans I've seen. And you could actually get far bigger input. I think it's 8%, the figure I think Councillor Cowell said that figure quite recently. That is so far below the average for an urban area in Britain. We have tremendous needs in this area. We have sink estates, we have a lot of difficulties, if we're completely frank about this. And I just think we've got the opportunity here to grasp the nettle far more effectively than we are doing at the moment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Councillor Pentney, you have a reply to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, by means of a response to Councillor Billings, I mean, bluntly, I don't care about what their last administration done. I'm, like I said, and this very much, by you making that point, you very much contradict yourself, because we are here to consider the application in front of us as the decision-making body this afternoon. And to slightly repeat myself, apologies, Chair, if there is I'm not saying I'm settled in any way at this stage, I want to hear the debate, but if there is a means by which we can up the percentage of affordable housing for the reasons that are well understood by everyone, then we should explore that. I'm not saying we could get there, but I'm just saying this committee should definitely explore it because that's in our shared interest.
Thank you, Councillor Paignton. Councillor Darling, I believe you're next. Thank you.
Thank you. It was. I'm always here to help, and I'm very happy to help Councillor Billings with the questions that he raised earlier on. And I would remind you, Councillor Billings, that Tor Vista is an independent company. You know, they may be wholly owned by Torbay Council, but they are their own entity. And I know that we've got two former cabinet members just over here, and I know Councillor Cowell and I were surprised and disappointed to see so little affordable housing in this application. And Councillor Billings, this resulted in us saying, actually, let's do a soft market test and see what we can achieve if we reach out to other registered providers. And that happened over the winter, and they came back this spring and said that there was one particularly that they said they could offer between 50 and 70%. So that explains how we've arrived at where we arrive, at where there's one element of the local authority, or at least a wholly owned company, that we can't, say, do this exactly because they are independent, but we wanted to market test that, and that gave us a massively different figure. And if we're here to serve the community, we should be trying to maximise the amount of affordable housing, because otherwise it's one of those knowing the price of everything and the value of nothing. And as Councillor Fox alluded to, the value of land is massive. And if we fail to deliver the goods, we're letting down some of the most vulnerable people in Torbay by just following through what the leader and deputy leader are here hoping you will do.
Thank you, Councillor Darling. Councillor Cowell, you're next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I suppose it's a request for a bit of procedural advice or legal advice in terms of what options are available to us for the applicant to consider the increase to the 50% minimum that Councillor Darling was alluding to. And obviously, as he said, we're very much aware of the conversations and some decisions and preliminary agreements with a registered provider and the support of Homes England that would enable that higher ratio to be delivered on that site. And whilst the comments have been made about the value of land, land is valuable. But my worry is that if the idea is that we get planning consent today, then there's a policy change to market the site and sell it off. We know from other land that we tried selling in Torbay that developers aren't falling over themselves to buy land in Torbay. And in fact, because of some of the other debt that is associated with this particular area of land, you need to recover that cost before you start getting a golden cheque to start sprinkling around the bay at will, as was indicated by a previous speaker. But in terms of that procedure, for the applicant to be encouraged to reconsider, what options are available to this committee?
Yes, we'd like to go ahead. Thank you.
I'll go first, but Mr. Cantrell may wish to come in as well. So there is the potential. Condition 36 talks about the affordable housing provision. If you or Councillor Darling or others proposed an amendment to that recommendation that put a different figure on that, that is within your scope to be able to do that. The difficulty from an officer point of view is that we'd struggle with the policy justification to say why it should be this or that, and that's, I think, what Simon will probably come in on. The other thing to note on this is we've tried to keep the planning side different from the sale of the site, and because our regulatory function of the development management side is just to look at the policy compliance. We know the discussions with a registered provider and others, and we know the figure that they would give to the council has not been confirmed. So we don't actually know what would be returned on a 50 or a 70% sort of affordable housing mix on this side. But our side the planning side is looking at making sure we get a good mix on a development that makes sure it works as a community, it isn't particularly loaded one way or the other, and hence why we've gone down the policy compliant point. But in many cases, development is permitted, and start. And in some economic circumstances, private landowners, private developers sell to registered providers, and we don't necessarily know in the future how many of those units have been sold as affordable units or as shared ownership. So we do have that control still as a council when we do the contract of sale with this portion of land. So we still have some controls there. But from the planning controls, I think we've been reasonable with the way in which the condition 36 is worded. But it's not going to seek that higher figure that you currently are proposing. Simon, do you want to?
Madam Chairman, I'd just add that the fundamental test in terms of imposition of a condition is whether the committee would refuse the application if that condition was not imposed, and we come back to the fact that the application is policy compliant in this case. So that's for a condition to be necessary, one of the tests is would the committee refuse the application if it wasn't imposed.
Thank you very much. Councillor Billings, you're next. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I struggle with some of the points that I'm hearing in this debate. We were told earlier, members, that the application before us was submitted by a wholly owned subsidiary of the council, which at the time wasn't necessarily following the direction of travel that the Cabinet wanted. I.e. the Cabinet, I understand, were wanting a greater affordable proportion, and the wholly owned council subsidiary went for this policy compliant 30%. If we follow that line of thinking through, if I apply what we've just been told by the council's planning solicitor, if the wholly owned council subsidiary was faced with a planning condition requiring 50%, and chose to challenge the imposition of that condition, it could get it removed. So it occurs to me we can't have it both ways. We can't be explaining this application because it was a wholly owned council subsidiary and they did something that at the time the Cabinet wasn't quite in favour of, on the one hand, and then saying now, well, subsequently we can fix it by requiring this wholly owned council subsidiary to be held by a planning condition which actually, if it was tested, wouldn't stand up against the tests for planning conditions. And that's why I think we really should be judging this application that we have before us on its merits, whether it's policy compliant or whether it's not. And in terms of the range of the options, we're either approving it, we're refusing it, or we're deferring it. We've heard the need to bring forward housing. We've heard the need to bring forward affordable housing. So in my mind, that takes away the deferral option. And I really can't see in that context why we would want to refuse it either. In my eyes, I'm clear, we're effectively faced with one option, which is approving what we've got in front of us. And perhaps, yes, as I explained earlier, if I were the applicant, I would have done things differently, and maybe the current administration might want to encourage the wholly owned council subsidiary to put in a revised application using their free resubmission that they're entitled to bring forward something slightly different. But that's a matter for a separate application, and we should be, in my view, considering this application we have before us on its merits. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Councillor Darling, if you'd like to reply. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm concerned that Councillor Billings is totally misrepresenting this situation. The reality is that it is an alternative registered provider who's talked at 50 to 70%, and they are happy with the planning application within its physicality, but feel that they would be able to achieve higher levels of affordable housing with the existing plans that there are there. So it wouldn't be asking the subsidiary company to do something different. It would be passing the parcel on to a third party who's able to bring greater abilities and funding to bear than a fledgling company of the local authority. I hope that makes matters a little clearer.
Thank you, Councillor Darling. I think I will bring this debate to a close. If there is no more, I think we are repeating ourselves a little now. Could I please ask whether there is a proposer? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Billings. Would you like to
Yes, Chair.
find the details?
We've just heard that there's a need for housing in Torbay. We're not currently able to show a 3-year land supply, and we've also heard the detail in terms of how there's a need for affordable housing. My proposal, having considered the officer report in detail with the significant amount of conditions, I was satisfied that they addressed all of the matters of concern, including those that were raised by members on the site visit, and my proposal would be for approval subject to the conditions outlined in the officer report.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Tolshard, thank you.
I'm very happy to second the proposal, Madam Chair, subject to the remarks made by Councillor Billings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tolshard. Okay, do we have any debate on the proposal? Thank you. Councillor Darling, thank you.
Rather unsurprisingly, and I will try not to repeat myself too much, but key facts are that the national average for a number of affordable housing is in your community is at 19%. Torbay we have 8%. We have the highest levels of deprivation in the southwest of England, and as has been highlighted earlier, land is the crucial issue in being able to deliver affordable housing. As I stated earlier, I would be encouraging us to seek an amendment to the proposals of a minimum of 50% affordable housing on this site, but that wouldn't be possible unless this particular proposal falls. So I would have great difficulty supporting this as it is not serving our community to its best. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Darling. Councillor Paignton, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the time being, I just think, as I mentioned earlier, my aforementioned stance was that this is such an opportunity. Like I said, we're using greenfield sites where we're a de facto developer, and unfortunately, by due process, and now we've got this proposal on the table. This is what we must consider first. It's a shame we haven't explored those other options as much as I think we could have. You're absolutely right. You're right. And I'm saying this as the former chairman of the committee. We have to consider what's on the table now. But I think this is such an opportunity. I would have liked to have seen a bit more exploration. Who knows, if the proposal fails, then maybe we'll get that chance again. But as it stands, I don't think I can support it, not because that's my settled position per se, but because I feel that there could be more time to explore those other options before we came to that conclusion. But we are where we are, and obviously we'll very shortly be moving to that road, I'm sure.
Thank you, Councillor Paignton. Mr Edmondson, would you like to follow up on that one?
Just a question as to whether or not Councillor Billings and Councillor Tolchard are considering that slight amendment to the wording of the condition about the start date. And I'm hoping as officers it sends out a message that we want to see developers, whoever they are, whether or not it's council owned or other developers, getting on with sites and delivering, and therefore we would suggest, but that's up to you, an 18-month sort of start date as opposed to a 3-year one within 18 months, quicker if possible. But I think it sends out a positive message about trying to get development happening on the ground.
Councillor Billings, would you be happy with that?
Having conferred with Councillor Tolchard, yes, we would be. I think we'd be happy with an 18-month time period. I think that would help address concerns in relation to getting development moving on this site.
Councillor Tolshard, would you be happy with that recommendation?
I'm very happy to support that, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cowell, thank you.
Thank you. I think it's Greece that years ago you didn't have to pay for rates or rents if you hadn't completed your property. So And that changed after the financial crisis, because all of a sudden people have put roofs on their buildings now and they haven't got steels sticking out of their flat roofs. Putting a start time on is admirable, but to me it's the completion time that is more important, because you can start by just doing a land clearance and that would be defined as a start, or putting in some footings. But really it's when will the 101st house be delivered? That's what's critical if we're serious about delivering our and overcoming our issue of land banking that we have in Torbay. Whilst the start date is admirable, as I say, I think it would be more appropriate to have a completion date. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cowell. Councillor Billings, thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, does Councillor Cowell have a suggested completion date in mind?
Councillor Cowell?
Well, given the fact I'm not a developer, I don't know how long it takes to build 101 houses, but if you've got an experienced developer with the infrastructure and the capacity to do it, I would have thought within 4 years would be a maximum date.
Thank you, Councillor Cowell. Anything else from the officers?
Just to come back, at the moment there isn't a mechanism, Councillor Cowell, for us to do that, to be able to put a complete... We'd love to be able to do that on so many developments, but there's no control over when something had to be completed by, which is hugely frustrating. So the best start is at least to get people moving on the application.
Thank you. Councillor Billings?
Just to help address the point that was made by Councillor Cowell, in terms of phasing plan, do we have a phasing plan in the extensive portfolio of work that the applicants provided, and does it show the affordable being delivered on the site to begin with?
Mr. Robinson?
We've controlled that by a planning condition on phasing, because we're conscious that there's obviously two parcels of land on the one site, so there is a level of control over the phasing of the scheme.
Thank you very much. Is there anything further from the officers who'd like to sum up on this application? Thank you.
Nothing in addition other than the slide, which I don't want to repeat. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, in that case, I will go to the vote. Please can I ask all those in support of the application, along with the condition, to raise their hands, please. And please can I ask those against? Thank you. And abstentions? Thank you very much. I declare this application is approved. Thank you very much. We're just going to take just a couple of minutes to resume for the next application. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'd like to resume the next application, please. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 6, to consider an application for 7 to 9 the Riviera, Paignton. There are no registered speakers for this item. Mr. Jim Blackwell, please to introduce the next application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is at 7 to 9 the Riviera. It's a change of use from C2 care home to C3B supported living. It's a former care home which closed recently in 2022, which provided accommodation for up to 20 residents. This is a proposal for 11 C3B self-contained socially rented units managed by an accomplished group, a key service provider contracted by the Torbay and South Devon NHS Foundation Trust. It's for residents recovering from enduring mental illness. It lies within the old Paignton conservation area, and the site location is on the Riviera itself, which is a road running west from Dartmouth Road. So the surrounding uses of this property are predominantly residential. There's some retirement apartments to the south, holiday apartments to the south and east, a care home to the north, and it's considered a sustainable location serviced by buses. It's a short walk to the town centre, the bus station and train station. It's an end of terrace property, but it also incorporates the adjoining building. It's actually identified as a positive group of buildings within the conservation area appraisal. Access is from the Riviera, which is a 30-mile-an-hour one-way road, and that site itself has got 2 access points to the south onto the Riviera. There are no external changes to this building, although there's a fence to the front which is due to be removed. It was erected by the previous owners, and it's shown to be removed on the plans, just for clarity there. This is the side elevation. This is a view from Fisher Street. This is the rear elevation, visible from the lane. It's quite an elevated position, this, so it wouldn't really be readily visible. Fairly standard care home layout. These are the existing plans. Note there are 2 adjoined properties. They're 7 and 9. The number of rooms, some with en-suites, reception rooms, kitchen, dining, and a separate office. These are all the bedrooms on the first floor. Some are en suite, some have separate facilities, shared facilities. And this is the existing second floor plan, which is 1 large bedroom with kitchen, offices, and a storeroom. So this is the proposed layout. There are 6 parking spaces provided, used for staff, visitors, and this is secured by a management plan that's been submitted, 2 electrical vehicle charging points, a refuse store, cycle store to match an existing office pod, and there are details secured through condition to make sure those are appropriate materials and sufficient outdoor space for residents. Let me just point those out with the laser pen I've just been taught how to use. So this is an existing office building here. Here are the new spaces here and a new pod here. This is the proposed ground floor plan. So relatively minor internal alterations, but form independent living spaces with a kitchen, bedroom and bathroom and a communal laundry, which is to the left-hand side of that plan. Here's a communal lounge again on the first floor on the left-hand side. Reintroduces social contact for those residents, and there's a staff bedroom for overnight staff visits. Here are 2 flats on the second floor plan. Again, here's that fencing to be removed to the front. The junction with Fisher Street and the Riviera. View from Fisher Street. Here you can see that existing office, and in the background you'll be able to see these parking spaces would go along here, and you get an existing cycle store to match that in there. This is the area to laid out for parking and the cycle store. Here are the neighbourhood plan policies. Material considerations. There are no planning issues identified or any objections to this. There's consultee support. The applicant has also confirmed that 11 of the units will provide 100% socially rented accommodation, to have a clear social benefit in favour of the scheme, The proposal would help address the need to provide additional homes in Torbay, providing accommodation for specific need. The officer recommendation. This is due to completion of the sustainable development obligation secured by Section 106, the conditions in the submitted report, and the resolution of any new considerations that come into light following Planning Committee to be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, including any additional necessary further planning conditions or obligations. And on that point, I just do have a very quick update that the final condition on use has changed to just tighten that condition. It's been agreed with the agent. You can see highlighted in yellow here, it's for 11 self-contained single-person flats. This is because the flats are self-contained and the share spaces are independent and essential parts of the use. The use for supported living was in use class 3B, and it needs to be controlled by that condition in the planning permission. It will also ensure that the units do not change through permitted development rights to unrestricted residential accommodation. The site is in an area where a change in either operation or occupation of the use type may lead to sort of detrimental effects on the area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As implied earlier, there are no speakers on this application, so shall we go to members' questions? Any members wishing to ask a question from the officers? Thank you. Councillor Billings, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two questions. I wonder first whether the officers could help me with whether the applicant has given any indication about the type of persons using the completed accommodation in terms of the reasons why they might be requiring supported living.
I'm not the original case officer of the application, so I'm covering someone's away, but I understand that some information has all been provided. It's in the management plan, and there's a level of control who those residents would be, so it's those recovering from illness.
And my second question, are officers, this site's relatively visible from Roundham Road on the opposite side of the mini roundabout, which is at higher level, and you see this property as you come down Roundham Road towards the junction, the mini roundabout. Are officers comfortable, given the conservation area, that there's been sufficient thought to within the external areas of the building, dealing with the increased amount of domestic paraphernalia that there might be, such as waste bins, etc., so as to maintain the appearance and look of the conservation area in this location?
Thank you.
Yeah, the building's identified as a important building within the conservation area appraisal, and that's considered in the officer report, mainly around the fact that it's the parking area at the moment is unlined. There's proposed to have cycle parking, there's the office, so in terms of any changes to the external fabric of the building, there are no changes to the building itself, only the site, and that's quite minimal and probably have a positive benefit on the significance of that asset.
Thank you. Does that answer your question for you?
I think it does. So if I can just clarify, officers are content that within the external area of the grounds there won't be any increased in visual appearance of domestic paraphernalia that would detract from the conservation area reasons for designation.
Yes, definitely. The significant would maintain. In fact, it'd probably be enhanced because there'd be new waste store, new cycle store. The vehicle positioned lines would actually make it an improvement, a betterment.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Any other questions? No other questions from the floor? Okay. Well, in that case, we will go to debate. Is there any debate from members? Thank you. No debate?
Chair, happy to propose approval as per the recommendation in the officer's report. Through you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Paignton, do I have a second? Thank you, Councillor Cowell, to second. Any debate on the proposal and the seconder? Thank you. Councillor Billings.
Chair, I think the proposal we have before us is very sensible, and personally I'd be happy to support that.
Thank you very much. Any officers like to sum up? Thank you.
No, I'm happy, thank you. The recommendation as that was on the screen earlier. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In that case, we'll go straight to the vote then. All those in favour? Thank you.
It's unanimous.
And that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so we will now move on to items 7 and 8. And this is to consider an application for a sports pitch, site adjacent to Brixham Cricket Club, 83 North Boundary Road, Brixham. We will discuss both applications together. When we get to a recommendation, we will deal with each application separately. The clerk has confirmed those who have registered to speak upon entry to the meeting. I will therefore ask Miss Verity Clark to introduce the application. Thank you.
Apologies, Chair. Could you just give us 2 minutes to swap over? Thank you.
Yep, so sorry, we'll just a few minutes. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. We just have a couple of technical issues with the next slide, so we're going to take about a 5 minutes comfort break just to allow the officers to sort the issue out. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry for the delay. We did have a few technical issues, but they have been resolved now. And so we are going to move on to items 7 and 8. As before, the application for a sports pitch site adjacent to Brixham Cricket Club, 83 North Boundary Road, Brixham. We will, as I said before, discuss both applications together, but when we get to a recommendation, we will deal with each application separately. The clerk has confirmed those who have registered to speak upon entry to the meeting. I will therefore ask Miss Verity Clark to introduce the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman. So I'll start with the first presentation, which relates to item 8 in the committee agenda pack, and that relates to application P/2020-0480. I will then, when I finish that presentation, move on to the next application's presentation. So the application site is a field adjacent to Brixham Cricket Club, which was formerly used for agricultural purposes. The site is located within the Long Road South to Berryhead countryside zone, the Berryhead to Sharkham undeveloped coast, and the South Devon area of outstanding natural beauty. The site is also within the Churston, Gampton and Broadsands mineral safeguarding area. So the field is located to the east of Brixham Cricket Club, and the pedestrian and vehicular access to the site is via the existing field gate near the southeastern boundary, which is accessed via a shared section of road with Brixham Cricket Club, which then provides access onto North Boundary Road. So if I just highlight using the little pen on the screen, this is the application site here. It's the top field. Access is internally running down this adjacent to the hedge line. There's an access point into the field which is existing, which is here, and then this section of the road is private, and that's shared with the Brixham Cricket Club, which then leads out onto North Boundary Road here. And then just on the right hand side here, this is the Brixham Cricket Club site. So moving on to the proposal, this plan shows the existing site layout with the context of the cricket club and the nearest dwellings to the southeast. So the top field, which is the location of this application, which I'm speaking about now, is divided from the bottom field by a boundary hedge. So just on the plans here, these are the nearest residential dwellings here along North Boundary Road. So the proposal seeks planning permission for an outdoor football pitch for sport and recreational use with an associated area of parking. Access to the pitch will be via the northeast hedge line, with parking for 30 cars and portable toilets located to the east of the proposed pitch. To facilitate the access, a new opening within the existing central dividing hedge is proposed, and a nature corner is also proposed in the northwest corner of the site. So just an update in terms of the committee report. Page 123 of the agenda pack and committee report states that North Boundary Road is identified in policy SC2.6 of the local plan as an area of search. The Strategic Planning Policy Officer has confirmed that the site allocation does not relate to this North Boundary Road site, but instead relates to an alternative site at Brokenbury Quarry. Therefore, whilst the site is identified within the playing pitch strategy, it is not allocated within the local plan. The supporting text of policy SC2 of the local plan does state that a number of proposals indicated in policy SC2, including at Churston, are shown as areas of search, whilst detailed plans are finalised. Whilst all of these projects are deliverable, it is possible, however, that alternative, more viable and sustainable provisions can be made on other sites to satisfy demand. So this application was resolved to be approved at the committee meeting held on the 14th of December 2020, subject to the signing of a Section 106 legal agreement to secure the community use of the pitch. The legal agreement has not been completed, so in line with the committee's resolution, the application has not been determined. So the committee is reminded that, as permission has not been granted, whilst having regard to the previous resolution, the committee should consider this application afresh. Since the resolution to approve this application, a further planning application, which I will present next, with the reference P/2022/0339, has been submitted for the change of use of agricultural lands to an outdoor football pitch, the formation of a parking area and changing rooms. This relates to the paddock area directly to the southeast of the current application site and would utilise the same vehicular access. And members should note that this application is also on the agenda for this planning committee and will be discussed next. So whilst both pitches have been submitted as standalone planning applications, both football pitches could be constructed, resulting in 2 football pitches across both sites, and consideration should therefore be given to the impacts of each development in isolation and in combination. The original plans considered for this application included an access around the lower paddock along the southwest of the site, accumulating in a parking area for 30 cars in the northwest corner of the site, and the formation of a centrally located football pitch. The revised plan, previously shown, has amended the internal access to the proposed football pitch. The changes to the layout are as a result of the submission of the application for the lower pitch, as the original plans would not allow for the implementation of the additional pitch. So this slide just shows a comparison of the 2 layouts, with the original layout detailed on the left and the current amended layout shown on the right. And you can see that the general location of the pitch is fairly consistent, but the internal access and layout of the parking has changed. So this was the one previously considered at the 2020 committee. You can see that the access point is here, which is the existing access. Vehicles and pedestrians would travel along the site. They would go along this corner of the field, and then a parking area was just in this top corner here. The pitch would be centrally located. So the current proposal uses the same access point here, but they would be travelling up this hedge line with a parking area in a linear sort of strip adjacent to the cricket club, and then you've got the main football pitch centrally, and then we've got a wildlife sort of corner, wildlife nature area up here rather than the parking, which was part of the original proposal. So then, for context, this plan shows the top pitch, which is proposed as part of this application, alongside the bottom pitch, which is proposed as part of the other application, which will be considered next. And then these are some photos taken from the shared access road with the cricket club. So in the left-hand picture, you can see the entrance to the cricket club directly in front. So that's here where these gates are, that's the cricket club entrance. And then the access to the proposed football pitch is in front of those gates and to the left, so just over here. And then the access to the site again is shown on the right-hand image. So this section here is the actual access into the lower field. So these photos are taken from within the site. So the top left image shows the break in the central boundary hedge, which will provide access to the top pitch and a linear parking strip. As you can see, the break in the hedge has already been undertaken, and a section of the access road leading to the location of the top pitch has been formed. So the top right image is looking towards the top northwest corner of the site, and you can see the existing goalpost, and beyond this is the location of the proposed wildlife corner. So the bottom left image is taken from this top northwest corner, looking towards the east and the southeast of the site and the boundary shared with the cricket club. And then the bottom right image is taken from the same location, but is looking towards the southeast dividing boundary hedge and the western boundary of the site and the adjacent field. So this slide lists the key material considerations which are considered in detail in the committee report. So as the committee report notes, a key consideration of the proposal is the impact on landscape given the sites within the South Devon AONB, the countryside area and the undeveloped coast designations. Both local and national policy highlight that development within or impacting on the AONB must demonstrate that great weight has been given to conserving and enhancing landscape and scenic beauty. As the committee report sets out, the proposal is considered to result in harm to the landscape, as it would further erode and degrade the unspoilt rural character of the area and the AONB, given the adverse visual and oral impact, and as the proposal is not a use typical of a rural character. Whilst the revised site layout is still considered to result in harm to the AONB and the undeveloped coast in terms of the impact on rural character and tranquility, the revised access and parking layout is considered to be an improvement to the overall layout previously considered acceptable, given the parking area will be sited next to an existing hedgerow, which is adjacent to parking and spectator facilities in the adjacent cricket club site. So the removal of the parking area from the northwest corner of the site and its replacement with a nature corner is considered to improve the layout previously considered acceptable, as this area of the site is particularly sensitive given its proximity to the public footpath to the north and northwest. Overall, however, the proposal is still considered to result in landscape harm, contrary to local and national policies around landscape impact. Since the application was considered at the December 2020 Planning Committee, a new draft Torbay playing pitch strategy has been produced and consulted on, and this indicates that the application site, known as John Charles Park, is identified as a key site for football. The strategy reiterates the need to protect identified space for sport and leisure facilities in order to keep up with demand, and the site is identified as important for future provision for additional pitches. The Council's Sport Development Officer supports the proposal and justification by the applicant for the pitch and the secondary pitch proposed under the separate application, given their analysis of other available sites and planning policy relating to sport provision. Issues relating to amenity, highway safety and parking, ecology and trees, flood risk and drainage, designing out crime and heritage are considered to be satisfactorily addressed within the proposal and by the recommended planning conditions. So on balance, the economic and social benefits of the provision of an additional sports facility aimed at youth and female football, for which there is an identified need, and through securing a legal agreement to ensure wider community use, is considered to outweigh the environmental harm, such that the proposal is considered on a fine balance to represent sustainable development. The amendments to the proposed layout are considered to result in an enhanced scheme to that previously presented to the committee and which was resolved to be approved. So this slide sets out the relevant local plan policies which have been considered in detail in the committee report. And similarly, this site sets out the neighbourhood plan policies which have been considered. So the officer recommendation is therefore that of conditional approval, subject to the completion of a Section 106 legal agreement to secure community use of the pitch, the conditions as set out in the committee report, and the resolution of any new material considerations that may come to light following the Planning Committee to be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, including the addition of any necessary further planning conditions or obligations. Thank you. So if the Chairwoman's happy now, I'll just move straight on to the next presentation, and then you can consider both applications sort of separately and sort of in conjunction.
Yep, thank you very much. If you'd like to continue.
Thank you. I'll just quickly swap, so bear with me. Sorry about that. Hopefully now the new presentation is on the screen. Yep. So, as with the previous application, the site is a field adjacent to the Brixham Cricket Club, and it's formerly used for agricultural and equine purposes. As with the previous application, the designations remain the same, so it's within the countryside zone, the undeveloped coast, and it's within the area of outstanding natural beauty. And the site's also within the Churstone, Gampton and Broadsands mineral safeguarding area. So the field's located to the east, again, of Brixham Cricket Club, and as with the previous slide show, the pedestrian and vehicular access to the site is via the existing field gate near the southeastern boundary, which is accessed again via the shared section of road with Brixham Cricket Club, which then provides access onto North Boundary Road. So this plan shows the existing site layout with the context of the cricket club and the nearest dwellings to the southeast. So the lower field, which is the location of this application, is divided from the top field by the boundary hedge. So I've lost my little pointer, I'm afraid, on the screen, so I'll revert back to my laser pointer, which hopefully you can see. So, sorry, if you'd like just to bear with me. Sorry for that. I think the wrong presentation was still showing on the screen, so I'll just revert back. This is the first slide, which shows the site location. I've got my little pointer back. So this is the location of the second pitch, which is the lower field, and then this was the top pitch that we were looking at a minute ago. So you can just see here, that's where the arrow is pointed. So that field, again, that's the cricket club to the east of the site. And then we've got the existing site layout again, which shows the context of the cricket club, and then the nearest dwellings. So this is the site, just this lower pitch, and then obviously you can see that's a lot closer to the dwellings, which are along here on North Boundary Road. So this proposal seeks planning permission for an outdoor football pitch for sport and recreational use, measuring 105 metres by 68 metres with an additional 3 metre runoff area. So the proposal also includes an associated area of parking, a changing room unit and security fencing. So access to the pitch will be via the northeast hedge line, with parking for 37 cars located predominantly adjacent to the top field and the location of the other pitch. So to facilitate access to the main parking area, a new opening within the existing central dividing hedge is proposed, and then the proposed changing room unit will sit to the northeast of the proposed football pitch and adjacent to the access gap in the hedge. So this blue square or rectangle, which you can see on the screen, that's the location of the changing room unit. So the proposal also seeks the addition of a metal mesh security fencing and an entrance gate along the southeast boundary adjacent to the existing hedge, which has a height of 2.5 metres, finished in a moss green colour. And this is illustrated by the red line of crosses below the proposed pitch. So that's just along here. You can see it follows along the hedge line. And then for context, this plan shows the bottom pitch, which is proposed as part of this application alongside the proposed top pitch. So as with the previous application, in terms of an update to the committee report, page 95 of the agenda pack and committee report states that North Boundary Road is identified in policy SC 2.6 of the local plan as an area of search, and the Strategic Planning Policy Officer has confirmed that the site allocation does not relate to this North Boundary Road site, but instead relates to an alternative site at the Brokenbury Quarry. So this plan detailed shows the proposed prefabricated changing and shower unit, which will be finished in timber cladding and measures 9.75 metres by 3.7 metres, with a total height from ground level of approximately 3.1 metres. The changing room unit will sit to the north-east of the proposed football pitch and adjacent to the access gap in the hedge. So, as shown in the previous presentations, these are photos taken from the shared access road with the cricket club. And then these photos are taken from within the site. So the top left image shows the break in the central boundary hedge, which will provide access to the main area of linear parking strip and the location for the changing room unit. The top right image is taken standing in the northwest corner of the proposed pitch, looking towards the southeast boundary and the rear of the dwellings along North Boundary Road. The bottom left image is taken standing with my back to the break in the central boundary hedge, with the northeast side boundary, where the internal vehicular access has already been formed to the left, and to the southeast boundary at the bottom of the photo. And then the bottom right image is taken from the southern corner of the site, looking towards the northeast boundary adjacent to the cricket club. So the following are further photos, particularly facing towards the rear of the nearest residential dwellings on North Boundary Road and the southeast boundary. So the proposed pitch will be sited approximately 20.2 metres from the rear of the nearest residential garden at its closest point, and approximately 34.5 metres to the rear of the nearest residential dwelling at its closest point. So again, this slide lists the key material considerations which are considered in detail in the committee report. As the committee report notes, and as I previously said in the last presentation, impacts on landscape character, the South Devon AONB, the countryside and undeveloped coast designations are a key consideration in this application, and national policy and local policy highlights the impact that development impacting on the AONB must demonstrate that great weight has been given to conserving and enhancing landscape and scenic beauty. So the report concludes that the proposal will result in harm to the landscape, as it would further erode and degrade the unspoilt rural character of the area. And the AONB unit have objected to the proposal on this basis. So having regard to the proximity of the public footpath to the north and northeast, given the use of the site as a football pitch, it's very likely that users of the footpath would be aware again of noise and activity from the site, and this would impact on the rural character and tranquility. There's also the consideration of a cumulative impact from the proposed development with the pitch proposed under the concurrent application, which, if both approved, would result in a larger area developed for the use of sporting facilities. So the proposal includes the addition of a prefabricated changing room unit finished in timber cladding. Originally, the changing room unit was to be finished in metal, appearing as a shipping container and was of greater size. Given the landscape concerns and comments from the AONB office, a revised plan reducing the size and utilising timber cladding to help assimilate the structure into the area was submitted, and these revised plans have resulted in an improvement to the visual appearance of the structure. It is, however, still concluded that the proposal would result in harm to the landscape. So the draft Torbay playing pitch strategy, which has been produced and consulted on, indicates that the application site, known as John Charles Park, is identified as a key site for football and that it requires access to changing provision. The strategy reiterates the need to protect identified space for sport and leisure facilities in order to keep up with demand, and the site is identified as being important for future provision. So the Sports Development Officer supports the proposal and the justification by the applicant for the pitch and the changing rooms, and the secondary pitch proposed under the separate application, given the analysis of other sites and planning policy. In terms of residential amenity, objectors have raised concerns regarding residential amenity, including concerns relating to privacy and overlooking, antisocial behaviour, litter and noise. The Council's Environmental Health Officer was consulted on the application and requested that an acoustic report was provided to assess the potential impact of noise from the proposed sports pitch at the nearest residential dwellings. A noise impact assessment was subsequently provided, which concluded that noise, due to the proposal, will result in no adverse impact or effect, and therefore no mitigation was required. And the Environmental Health Officers reviewed the context of the report and agreed with the findings, noting that there was no objection. This officer also confirmed that he did not consider sound-absorbing netting to be required, nor did they consider it necessary to limit the hours of use of the pitch, given that no external lighting is proposed, which would naturally restrict the hours of use. So as set out within the committee report, the proposal is therefore considered to have an acceptable impact on residential amenity. Concerns have also been raised by objectors about the use of the field for other temporary activities and uses, and permitted development rights allow certain temporary uses without the need for planning permission. Given the distance of the field to the nearest residential dwellings, uses allowed via permitted development rights for temporary events have the potential to impact on neighbour amenity, and as such a condition is recommended restricting temporary events. This would still allow football-related activities and events such as tournaments, but will restrict other uses on site. So the other key issues and material considerations listed are looked at in detail in the committee report and are considered to be adequately addressed. So again, on balance, the economic and social benefits of the provision of an additional sport facility aimed at adult football, walking football and youth football, for which there is an identified need, and through securing a legal agreement to ensure wider community use, alongside a changing room facility, is considered to outweigh the environmental harm. Such a proposal is considered on a fine balance to represent sustainable development. So as with before, this is the list of the relevant local plan policies which have been considered, and these are the neighbourhood plan policies which have been considered. So the officer recommendation for this second application is conditional approval, subject to the completion of a Section 106 legal agreement to secure community use of the pitch, the conditions as set out in the committee report, and the resolution of any new material considerations that may come to light following planning committee to be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, including the addition of any necessary further planning conditions or obligations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Clark, for your presentation. I now call Mr Mike Morey to address the meeting in support of the application. Mr Morey, if you'd like to come and take the seat at the front. You have 5 minutes and the clerk will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You'll be pleased to know I won't take the 5 minutes up. I do not, for the reasons that Verity has given a brilliant outline of the proposal. She stifled me from saying what I wanted to say. Excuse me. It's good to see some old faces here, some older than others, Councillor Carroll. But why have I come out of retirement as such today? For 2 reasons, because the applicant asked me, but secondly, and probably more importantly, it is because I and others have recognised what the applicant is trying to achieve, excuse me, and the importance it plays in the well-being of the community life of Brixham. As background, within the last 2 years, two and a half years, we have lost 2 important pieces of land which was identified and used for, or some were used for sport. We had the, obviously identified in the local plan, and Adam would know better than me, that the sports facility identified at Churston, which has now gone to approval for the solar farm. So that was one piece of land we've lost. Secondly, we have now lost another piece of land at Century Road. That was previously shared between youth football and youth rugby. That has now been lost as to a tourist facility. So it is widely recognised how important sport and physical activity is, not only to the physical health of the people, but also to the mental health. And so to see the availability of land being reduced, I believe it could have a considerable adverse consequence, and therefore the importance of what the applicant is trying to do should not be underestimated. If this application is approved by members today, and I obviously hope it does, it is hoped to develop sporting activities even further to benefit all ages, both female and male. And I know the applicant would speak more on that. The importance of this piece of land for sport has been recognised, as Verity said, in the playing pitch strategy, which I was, in a previous life, involved in, right up to the hilt, basically. And where we are now, I think I need to identify the hard work that the planning department, the council sports development team, the architect and the applicant have in achieving this place where we are at the present. Excuse me. And what is important, that hard work has now led to planning officers being more than comfortable in recommending approval to members. As I said earlier on, the two reports before you seem to be an accurate record of the process to date and identifies the wide range of...
1 minute remaining.
Oh, have I taken that long? I apologise. Have taken place, and you'll see on pages 76 and 77 some of the consultation, some of the feedback from groups and others. Therefore, I do ask, winding up, I ask members to give your approval to both of these applications, so benefiting the health and well-being of our community and providing a much-needed facility in the Brixham Churston area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morey. I now call the applicant, Sean Langdon, to address the meeting in support of the application. Mr. Langdon, if you'd like to come and take a seat at the front. You have 5 minutes and the clerk will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to come along really just to tell you about the positive impacts that this facility is going to be able to create. Over the past year, I've run my own company doing children's football, working in all the local primary schools in Brixham, providing sports cover, PE lessons, all that sort of stuff. But since taking on this facility, we've been able to sort of give birth to Brixham Town Football Club, which was a club that sort of folded. We brought back. We started out in the first year with only having an adult team and a youth team. This was our second season we're in now. Going into next year, there's the potential of having 11 youth teams, 2 adult teams, a walking football team, girls football teams, and this is all just off the last few years. What we can do by having this facility and being able to develop it further and to be able to keep producing more teams, it's just going to make for more children getting involved in the sport and more people being active. But on top of that, we have other things that we've been doing, like work with the asylum seekers that have been in the local area. We've been putting on free sessions for them to come up and have somewhere to do their sport, and we've just been trying to. We're starting to launch a ladies' football night in the next couple weeks. So we're trying to sort of get as much in as possible. We've also worked with different things in the community, trying to do different things for so it's not just football. So like providing community fun day, things like that, is something that we would like to do in the future as well, to keep providing for everybody and not just the sports. But on the football side of things, the main thing really is having this facility is going to just be able to help us drive on further. We were one of the only 2 clubs in the local area to be selected by the Devon FA as a future clubs to be put on the Future Clubs programme. Now, that was us in Paignton Villa, and we were able to go to we were invited to St George's Park to speak to all other like-minded clubs, and the information and the fact that they were willing to put us into that shows that the backing we have from the Devon FA shows that they believe in what we're trying to do and trying to provide. And I really think that, like I say, having this application, if you guys do decide to accept this application, you are really having a massive impact on what we are providing as sport in Brixham. So basically I just wanted to come tell you a bit about what we're doing, and hopefully you can see that it's really positive, and everything that we're doing is really going to benefit so many in our community. So yeah, thank you. I think I was quicker than Mike, even though Mike thought he was going to be. So thank you very much for letting me come in and speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Langdon. If you'd like to take your seat. Okay, so committee members, I will now invite questions to the planning officer. Please may I remind members, questions should only cover matters not raised in the presentation. Are there any members wishing to ask a question? Thank you. Councillor Fox.
A couple of questions, very interesting presentations. Thank you for those. First one on the AOMB. It has the equivalent status as Green Belt. It's extremely strong. And the national policy document, the MPPF, does in fact say that the only exceptions to this should be, or basically major development should not be allowed except in exceptional cases. And I just would like some advice from the officers as to whether they consider these sites major development or not. That's my first question. And my second one is over the travel plan, and are there any outstanding issues in relation to the implementation of that plan? So it's the strength of the AOMB and whether this is major development or not, and the travel plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Ms Clark, if you'd like to answer those questions, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'll just bring it up on the committee report because it does go into detail about the consideration on if we consider the proposals to be major development in terms of the AOMB definition. So let me just find that again. So yes, paragraph 177 of the MPPF sets out the presumption against major development in the AOMB. So whether the proposed development will constitute major development in terms of the area of outstanding natural beauty, you have to look at footnote 60 of the MPPF, which states that the decision maker would need to take into account its nature, scale and setting, and whether it could have a significant adverse impact on the purposes for which the area has been designated or defined. So in my consideration in both of the separate committee reports, I've looked at them sort of standalone and then in combination. So when considering something's major, when looking at the scale and nature of the proposal, it's my assessment that we would not consider the 2 applications, either standalone or in combination, to constitute major development. And that's given the fact that the proposal is predominantly maintaining the grass sort of field setting. It's quite sort of small scale and low key in nature. So I think even though it would result in a change of use, when looking at that definition set out in the MPPF, I wouldn't consider either pitch, alone or in combination, to constitute major development for the MPPF definition. Does that clarify?
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Fox?
Sorry. The other part, it was in relation to the transport plan or travel plan. and whether in fact officers are satisfied that the implementation for that is something that's acceptable or not.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you. So one of the planning conditions recommended on both of the applications is that for a further travel plan is to be submitted. And that's because although details have been given within the travel plan, which has been submitted for both applications, we would be looking to bring about a net reduction in sort of car access to the site. So we'd be looking to support sort of sustainable transport measures. And that does tie in with one of the other conditions which requires bike storage. But that was on the recommendation of the Highway Authority that a condition was added. So we would look to cover that via the condition stage. Does that cover it?
Thank you very much. Councillor Billings. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms Clark, question please. On the applications we're considering, is any part of the development, has it been commenced? So is any of the application retrospective, please?
Yes, so if I just scroll up just to screen. So the top site is already used as a football pitch, so that's retrospective. The gap in the hedge to create access to that football pitch has already been made, so that's retrospective. And then this area of aggregate to allow the access and a small area of parking, that's already been formed. So the lower pitch has not been formed, and this higher area of parking has not been formed.
Thank you. I wonder whether we could just turn to the wording of condition 1, please, in relation to the restoration of land. Let me know when it's happy to proceed.
Sorry, I'm there. That was a lot of scrolling.
I have similar trouble with these extremely long reports on a screen. You refer there to the site being returned to its former condition, should it not be used. Does that not, perhaps, on reflection, introduce a bit of uncertainty in relation to the wording? Because as of today's date, the former condition is a football pitch in part that's not been authorised, and so perhaps rather than the word former condition, would we perhaps be a little bit safer to refer to agricultural use as permanent pasture? Because I'm just a little I think there could possibly be a lack of clarity about what we mean by the word former there, perhaps. Do you think?
Thank you. So, yeah, I suppose it was former condition when you look at the description of the development, so it's the change of use from agricultural to football pitch, but I do acknowledge there could be some ambiguity, so we could look to alter the wording of that condition if members are minded, and it could sort of clarify that the existing condition is agricultural, just for complete clarity.
Thank you for that. I'm wondering whether we could turn to condition 9 as well, please.
Can I just check condition 9 of, is that the 2020 or the 2022 application?
It's the one that refers to external lighting.
Is that the no external lighting should be installed within the boundary, or
correct.
Is that
Correct,
okay? Because
yeah.
I think they're both lighting.
So we've got no external lighting should be installed within the boundary. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that condition wouldn't preclude lighting within the changing rooms were that to be installed by the applicant. Would that be correct in my interpretation?
Yes, so it's only external, so that would be counted as an internal light within the built form of the changing room. So it would only be anything externally on the building or around the wider site.
Okay. and my experience previously is where we've been looking at applications within the Greater Horseshoe Subsidence Zone and where there's clear evidence of a flight path being important, where we've had lighting inside a building, we've typically asked the applicant to provide an external sophisticated drawing showing the light spread into the external area from within inside the building. Is that a correct generalisation, perhaps?
So I can't say I've seen that condition used before on any applications I've used, but what I would say is that the ecologist from Devon County Council has considered the ecology report that's been put forward for the applications, and it was his suggestion that details of external lighting be provided by condition on the application, which has got the condition which says any further lighting should be provided. On this condition that we're looking at here, condition 9, which says no external lighting should be submitted. The main reasoning that it's no external lighting is because that's closer to the residential dwellings and the potential impact of lighting and the fact that then there would be extended hours of use. So that's why those conditions are slightly different on the two applications. But going back to the ecologist sort of point, he has not asked for that level of detail. So as that's not part of his professional recommendation, that's not included as part of the planning conditions.
And then as a final question, this site we've heard in relation to the earlier application we were considering of Preston Down Road, the case officer in that instance suggests a removal of certain permitted development rights, wanting to ensure that the proposal was landscape-led. This site, my understanding is in a more sensitive landscape designation, is that correct?
So this site's within the AONB and the undeveloped coast and the countryside area. So I think the Preston Down Road site, from what I just heard from Jim, is not within the AONB. So I would say it is more sensitive. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Are there any more questions for the officers? Yep. Councillor Tolshard, thank you.
Thank you. You're talking about looking at the travel plan again. So bearing in mind, I think that, well, hopefully there's lots of young people travelling to use the facility, that consideration should be given to adequate and additional, in a way, you know, cycle storage, which would be good. Just a second point that I wanted to raise, obviously external lighting has been excluded. Would it be sensible to put a time limit on when activity should cease of an evening? Because you know, days can get longer, as it were, and it could be stretched. I mean, you know, perhaps a cut-off point of 9 p.m. or something like that might be sensible. I don't know.
So no condition limiting the hours was put forward on the committee reports, and that was just on the basis of the professional advice of the environmental health officer after he received the acoustic report from the applicants. But certainly if members think it's reasonable to add a condition restricting the hours, they could of course consider doing so.
Thank you, Councillor Tolshard. Councillor Billings, I believe you've got another question.
Just following up, Ms Clark, on the question that Councillor Tolshard raised. Could you talk me through, please, obviously football, there's a proposal to have sort of a football pitch. Could you talk me through the indications of the intensity of the use, how many games per week the applicants indicating would take place on those? So I would understand for local residents how many nights a week there might be games occurring, and also in terms of non-football uses, so for example a fundraising fete or these other sorts of fundraising events that a football club might put on to raise money. How many of those, if we've got any indication of how frequent they might be from the applicant, please?
So we don't have any indication in terms of fundraising sort of fates. There's no indication from the applicant. I'm just looking for, here we go. So on one of the pitches, the proposal is for girls and ladies football of 1 hour per week. On that same pitch, youth football for 3 hours per week, and then sort of club football for 4 hours. So that's a total of 8 hours per week on one of the pitches. And then the second pitch would be adult football for 2 hours per week, walking football for 1 hour per week, and youth football for 2 hours per week. So that's 5 hours. So 8 hours on one pitch, 5 hours on the other is what's put forward by the applicant as what they think they can achieve in terms of, because it's a grass pitch, that obviously will naturally limit how much activity you can undertake on the pitches, and like the conditions and weather. So that obviously may be subject to change, but that's what they've put forward as what they're intending to do.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Any further questions on that one? No. Any further questions from the members? No? Okay, thank you. In that case, I open the application for debate. Thank you. Councillor Cowell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think I nearly called him Councillor Morey then. It's a creature of habit. Mr. Morey raised legitimately the displacement of potential sports facilities at the southern end of the bay with the loss of Brockenbury. Originally that site was supposed to have been to replace the lost pitches in Long Road when the Nortel building was developed, which is now South Devon College. And I remember when we were talking about the local plan many years ago, that we fought to maintain that Brockenbury site as a possible area for sport, subject to the emergence of other land towards the Brixham end of the bay. That has emerged subsequently, and I think we're quite fortunate that that has happened, given the loss of Brockenbury. And I think there would have been a lot more concern about football. In fact, I know there was at the time, of football pitches potentially going at the Brockenbury site anyway. But I think when I hear some people who have on other projects voice concerns about the nature of football and the fact it attracts antisocial behaviour and it's negative, you know, I lived at White Rock, I was born at White Rock, and there's 2 football pitches there, which were much more heavily used when I was younger. And I think that is a testimony to the fact that football as a team sport in Torbay and across the UK has been in decline. So I think it's excellent, and I commend the club and the community in Brixham for working to develop these plans before us. And I think it's great to see that the Devon FA in particular are also supportive of this proposal. Building relationships with the national governing bodies in sport is something that has been lacking in the past, and I think the fact that they're prepared to back this project shows the viability and the demand, because the FA, despite their wealth, aren't used to dipping their hands in their pockets to support football. And of course, referring to one of the conditions, 2 of the conditions actually, one is relating to use by the community, which I welcome, and I don't think it would need to be a condition anyway, because I'm sure that a community-based sports club would be more than happy to support community activities within their facilities. That happens elsewhere. But also the reinstatement condition, I think, is key as well. And whether that needs to be tweaked to, say, original condition would actually satisfy the points made by Councillor Billings. I mean, I'd be happy to accept that as a tweak to those conditions. But other than that, I think it's an excellent proposal coming forward, and subject to debate and being persuaded otherwise, I'd be happy to move its acceptance. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cowell. Thank you, Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to pay tribute to the sheer enthusiasm we heard earlier by the applicant when he spoke. It was really nice to see the enthusiasm that he brought from a personal perspective to the proposal. And I think for members of the committee that was extremely helpful. However, balanced against that, when we're looking at sort of land use, we do need to think about things for the very long term. And hopefully that site will be there sort of well into when we're all not around and not on this committee and our children are there. And so I do think we sort of need to also just think about at times in the future when the operator of the site might not be so community spirited, and just have that in our minds when we're considering the application. But it was really nice to see and hear from Mr. Langdon with the enthusiasm he brought. Just picking up on a few points. I do think that notwithstanding what I've said, I was the vice chair of the neighbourhood forum in Brixham when the community wrote the neighbourhood plan. And what got the community's backing was policy E1, and particularly paragraph E1.3, which refers to great weight being given to preserving and conserving AOMBs. And I'm very aware that in many respects what we've got here is an application that doesn't sit brilliantly in relation to being located in an area of outstanding natural beauty, because this is more an urban type development that one wouldn't typically expect to see in an AOMB. So I think also we just need to be sort of slightly cautious, notwithstanding the fact that there's a very clear community benefit from this. We are looking at an area of outstanding natural beauty, and we are looking at a parcel of land where the local community in their neighbourhood plan said that their great weight needed to be placed on preserving and conserving the AOMB. So there is that balance, and I think, and that's part of our role as committee members to look at. I feel that this issue of should the site ever not be needed for the purposes of sports use or football, I do think we need to change the proposed wording to refer to agricultural use as permanent pasture rather than former condition. And I would also think, seeing as there's a section 106 being entered into by the applicant, I think that should be written into the section 106. In my view, that would be more consistent with the way we've looked at this AOMB in relation to other applications. And I hope that wouldn't cost anyone any money, because if the section 106 is being entered into anyway, that's presumably just helping the community understand that at the time that this development, if any in the future wouldn't be needed, it would be restored back to its previous use. And I also think that, just picking up on some of the comments that have been made by adjacent residents that I had the opportunity of looking through, I think we could help address some of their concerns by just thinking through whether there's a condition in terms of the hours of use and the frequency of use that enabled the applicant to do everything that he's indicating he'd like to do, but to give some check and balance that if the use changed at any point in the future, so it was significantly different, then a planning committee in the future would need to reconsider that, or the council as the local planning authority would have the opportunity to reconsider that. That was some of my main views on this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. So I go back to Councillor Cowell with your proposal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As proposed by the Officer recommendation, subject to the conditions for the first application, because I think we're taking them in order, then that would be agenda item 7 first. I'm happy to propose that.
Thank you, Councillor Cowell. Do I have a second? Councillor Pentney.
I'm happy to second, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pentney. Do we have any debate on that, please? Councillor Billings.
Yes, Chair. it wasn't clear to me in terms of the conditions that were being put on the approval. And whilst Councillor Cowell beat me to proposing approval, I have got drafted in front of me some suggested conditions that we could put on that could address some of the points that I think were covered. The first one was was reflecting in the Section 106 a requirement to return the land to agricultural use as permanent pasture should it ever not be required for sports going forward. That was the first one. And that would pick up an issue currently raised in Condition 1 as an alternative. The second point was in relation to Condition 10. At the moment, this is a planting matter. It's primarily focused on ecological benefit. I think we should include the word screening in there to enable the officers who will be signing off on that condition just to be able to ensure they could address any of the issues that come up, not just in terms of ecological mitigation, but also screening. So I just like the word screening in there as well. The third point was a condition reflecting the frequency of use. I think that we've heard from officers that we've got a proposal for at the moment 13 hours a week use, a total. It would seem to me to be appropriate to say 15 hours a week use as a round figure, or some amount a total, just to put in there so there's some check and balance, with also with a time period of when use would stop. Also, we've had in the previous application with Preston Down Road, we looked at removal of certain permitted development rights. It would seem to me, if this is a more sensitive parcel of land, we would be appropriate to be consistent on that, and so I'd like us to reflect that. And then I was going to reflect something on lighting, because I'm aware that if this is a housing scheme with interior lighting, we'd be asking the applicant for details of that, but reflecting the fact that the office has indicated that that's not required, I'm quite happy to leave it to the other points that I've raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Councillor Cowell, listening to any of those conditions, are you happy to include any? Thank you.
In terms of the conditions, the 106 relation to reinstatement, I think that's valid. I wouldn't be supportive of restricting the hours of use either to a number of hours or even to a termination time. I think if we have facilities that are available, we need to make sure that they're available to maximise the use. There is a natural limitation on the amount of use that you can apply on a football pitch because of the amount of wear and tear, particularly in the winter months. You know, even with the best drainage in the world, Torquay United won't let anybody play on their pitch more than twice a week. Play may be a subjective description at play more, but in terms of most football pitches, they are limited by their actual available use. So, as I say, I'm happy to accept a definition in terms of the restoration, but not the other ones.
Thank you, Councillor Cowell. So just going to the officer, would that be acceptable to include those conditions? Thank you.
I'll let Ms Clark come in as well, but when Councillor Cowell first made his proposition, he talked about tweaks to the conditions. We are talking here about clauses within the Section 106 agreement, and I think the suggestion of putting in the agricultural, returning to permanent pasture agriculture use into the Section 106 agreement is probably a sound move. The government suggests we cover it by planning condition if we can, and we usually do, and that's why it was proposed, but I think we can do it by Section 106 agreement, which is what you're suggesting. I would implore the applicant to sign that Section 106 agreement. That's not the critical bit, it's the community use that it's so important as well, and to regularise what's already there and what's being proposed, we definitely want that agreement signed, and you'll get two for the price of one now because there's two applications. And on the hours of operation, you could, as a committee, seek to do that, and we could word something appropriately depending on the way you go with that. Screening for landscaping, I think, would be a reasonable addition to change that, sort of enhancing the existing landscaping. And the PD rights is one that you'll have to decide, which is the final one that Councillor Billings mentioned. But agricultural land can be used for other things that maybe this applicant has got no intention for doing, but the land could be used for other purposes. And I suppose that's why Councillor Billings was suggesting removing that restriction, I suppose, removing that allowance to be able to do that. But these can all be covered by clauses and amendments to the planning conditions.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Billings. Councillor Fox.
Just for absolute clarity, Councillor Cow, this is in no way an intention to try to restrict what we've heard described by the applicant in relation to this application. The suggested wording in relation to conditions is to try to limit things we haven't been told about that don't bear relation to football club use, that could conceivably go on the site once it's provided with a highways access for other things by alternative people in the future. It's not in relation to try to limit what the football club itself are describing, or what we're looking at in terms of this application. That wasn't the intention where I was coming from with those suggestions.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Councillor Fox, thank you.
Yes, I share Councillor Cowell's concern over restricting on the number of games per week and even on the times. When it gets dark, you won't be able to play. So there's going to be a natural, and football's primarily a winter sport anyway on that. But I just wonder whether the officers had any advice on the applicability of putting in some sort of condition relating to hours of use.
Through you, Chair. We haven't got the enforcement resource to be sat down there watching and making sure that things are finishing at that time, if that's what you're hinting at, Councillor Fox. And I suppose our own professional officers, the environmental health officers, have not recommended that themselves because they don't believe it's necessary, taking account of the proximity to residential properties. But I think Councillor Billings' angle was less so from the residential amenity, more so the disturbance to the OMB and the horseshoe bats and other foraging animals.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Back to Councillor Cowell. Are you happy for any of the conditions that have just been aforementioned? Thank you.
As previously stated, Chair, I mean, the condition in regard to time limits, I would not accept. The screening, fine. The 106 Amendment stroke, the agricultural reinstatement, fine. I think that's sensible. But there was a fourth one as well, wasn't there, I think? PD rights. Yeah, again, I mean, if we want to strengthen that, then that would be acceptable. So it's only one out of the four that I would not be happy to support.
Thank you, Councillor Cowell. So going over to our seconder, Councillor Pentney, are you happy with those further conditions? Thank you.
I'm still happy to second Councillor Cowell's amended proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Pentney. So I think we will go to the vote.
One last.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
One last thing. There is a condition already on the recommendation about the removal of PD rights, but I think Councillor Billing is suggesting further restrictions, and I suppose it would be appropriate to minute that on the recommendation as to what those further rights we're looking to remove, so that the applicant and the landowner is aware of what we're taking away, as it were. So.
Thank you. So we'll just put back to Councillor Billings, and then we will actually go to the vote. Thank you.
So just before we touch on that, Madam Chair, could I perhaps rephrase a matter to see whether Councillor Cowell might allow it as an amendment? In relation to football games, you're saying you want there to be no restriction and an unlimited amount of football games. Does that relate to that use? Is that what you're concerned about in restrictions? Or if that site is used for other things, would you also want to be there to be no limit on that?
Councillor Cowell.
I think it's a hypothetical question because I don't know what other uses. I mean, if for example, the football club are planning to attract a major artist and have stadium entertainment and concerts, then I think that would be a serious issue. So if we actually wanted to identify specific events or uses that would not be, I mean, how long's a piece of string in this case? And the fact that we're actually putting a condition in there to encourage community use seems to actually counter. And my experience, and I think all of our experience, where we have pieces of land either in the council ownership or in private ownership or leased, is that people are really responsible in terms of the use. And some of those events that would require significant attendance, for example, would need to be a licensed event, I believe, through our licensing authority anyway. So I wouldn't share those concerns based on experience around the Bay.
Thank you, Councillor Cowell. So obviously, as was the proposal. All right, so we are going, thank you.
Come back on the permitted development rights.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Billings.
Perhaps Mr Edmondson could assist me. You asked for clarification of the specific PD rights. The concern was coming from the landscape impact on the AOMB from alterations that would be capable of changing the site, the proposal we have before us into something else. We've looked at means of enclosure. Could you assist me with what PD rights the applicant would have going forwards?
So the recommendation has conditions 17 and 18, which takes away a considerable amount of those permitted development rights, which include other temporary uses of the land or other structures and buildings on the land in any event. We've already got those conditions on there. Going further than that, agricultural permitted development can include the siting of caravans for a temporary period, as you know, on certain areas of land. So we could go even more explicit and reference that. But I don't know if there's any other particular things that Ms Clark is concerned.
Can I just clarify on that? Both applications have a recommended condition which removes permitted development rights for gates, fences, means of enclosure, but only the lower pitch application has a recommended condition removing Part 4 of the General Permitted Development Order rights, which is for temporary buildings and uses. And that would stop sort of car boot sales, things like that taking place, and that's due to the proximity to the residential dwellings. But that is not recommended on the application for the top pitch. So the conditions do slightly vary. A lot of PD rights relate to if a site's in like residential householder use, so they wouldn't apply in this instance. I think if the applications were both approved, because it's retrospective and works have taken place, we would say that the use is the football pitch use, so it's no longer agricultural, so it wouldn't have those agricultural PD rights. So I think there's probably quite few and far between permitted development rights they actually would have intact, other than maybe the temporary uses, which have looked to restrict on the lower pitch closer to the houses, if that helps to clarify a little bit.
Then if the wording of the section 106 referred to restoration to agricultural use as permanent pasture, but the wording of the consent referred to current use as a football pitch, and officers applied a restriction on temporary caravans and buildings on both parcels, that would address my concerns on the PD points.
I need help wording on that.
Okay, thank you. Would Councillor Cowell be happy to include that?
Yeah, I think the suggestions made by Councillor Billings do tighten up and further define those PD right amendments. So happy to accept that.
Thank you, Councillor Cowell. Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Darling, and then I think we really should.
Thank you. I'm just concerned about kind of like the dead hand of the state impacting on football clubs. I also reflect to myself that I know that when I've had some slight involvement with football clubs, as they improve and go towards things like the Peninsula League, there's the assumption that there's going to be bits of fencing and things like that. Why are we as a planning committee trying to restrict the ambitions of this club by stopping the raising of fencing? I do have concerns about having such permitted development rights blocked.
Thank you, Councillor Darling. Okay, so I think we are going to go to the vote as long as the officers are happy with the wording. Thank you.
Sorry, Chairman, I just need a moment just to clarify the wording. So obviously we've had the condition, the clear one, which is the condition 10 to include the word screening, reflecting in the section 106 to require the land to be returned to agricultural use for permanent pasture, and also the section 106 to reflect it was no caravans.
Agricultural permitted development rights to include caravans and structures across both sides.
To reflect
the 106 will cover
agricultural and
agricultural permitted development rights, including caravans and structures.
So including caravans and temporary buildings. Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, I think we need to go to the vote on this. So all in favour? Thank you. And against? And any abstentions? Just the one. Okay, thank you. That application is carried. Thank you. Thank you. Just going on then to the second part of that application. All those for?
Sorry, Chair, before we go to the vote, can officers just talk us through the differences, is any in the conditions between one application and another? Because I know the conditions that are currently written into the officer report are slightly different. Could that just be flagged, please, before we go straight to the vote?
To the officers.
There are quite a few differences, only because one is retrospective and one is a proposal. The legal agreement will cover both applications, so we'll go with the land in perpetuity for any future owners as well, and will apply to them as well. So those points about the agricultural permitted development and things will be specifically covered in that, and the return to agricultural land permanent pastures. But the conditions are slightly different on the second application due to its proximity to residential properties than the first one. In fact, they're probably stricter on the second one than the first. Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Billings.
Chair, did we have bearing in mind we've considered the application sequentially, do we need a new proposer for this application? And if so, I'm proposing approval subject to conditions. But I'd like to detail those.
Yes, we would need a new proposer. Sorry. Yeah. So, Councillor Billings.
Okay, then I'd like to propose, and we're talking here about the football pitch closest to the residential properties.
Yes, we are.
So I would like to propose approval with the conditions and amendments to the section 106 we just described, but also in this particular proposal, given the proximity of the residential dwellings, I do feel we ought to have a time restriction in terms of a time period, a cut-off at some time of the evening in terms of when the site would be used. And in the absence of any other suggestion, I would propose 9:30 p.m. In terms of when it would be used.
Okay, can we just go to the officers to just clarify that, please?
Again, if that's what committee wish to do, we can put a planning restriction on there like that. Our environmental health colleagues have advised they don't believe that's necessary because of some of the discussion we've had about light and things anyway, and enforcing that time scale. But it is a legitimate proposal to put forward, and one that we would seek to administer any breach of that condition if it were to occur.
Thank you. Councillor Billings, are you still happy to put that motion on the table?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder?
Excuse me. Sorry. Can I just...
Yes, please go ahead.
Sorry. If you are putting that forward, can we just have clarification on exactly the times? Because we couldn't just write a condition which said nothing beyond 9:30 because we wouldn't know when they could start again. So we just need starting from this time and ending at that time, if possible.
I was trying to reflect the latest time it's plausibly daylight during summer hours, just to reassure some of the residents in that section whose lesser representations I've heard. So when's it? So are you suggesting we've got to have a start time in the morning or just an evening time when it would finish? Can we not just leave it to an evening time when it would finish?
I think we would need both because we wouldn't know then when they could resume again. So what hours in the morning are unacceptable? So could they resume again at 2 a.m. or I think we need sort of strong clarification on exactly the hours that you would find acceptable then, because otherwise we couldn't enforce that condition.
Okay, well, maybe officers could guide, but perhaps 8 o'clock in the morning?
Yes, I think that seems reasonable.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Can I just say, because I have absolutely no wishes, no one around this table wants to curtail what goes on, and it may sound a bit pedantic to you, I'm sure it does. We applaud the wonderful enthusiasm, but there is also, because that second pitch is actually much nearer North Boundary Road, and whether we like it or not, I happened to have been at the cricket club the other night and it got dark quite late. I looked out and thought, good heavens, they could almost still be playing cricket. But I also appreciate the point about enforcing it, but I'm sure that you're very responsible people and will bear in mind that there are residents nearby. No one wants to upset the residents. It's a marvellous facility. We all applaud, what you're doing there, I'm sure. Absolutely great. It's obviously, increasing and wonderful to hear about, the increase in girls' football. But I do think perhaps it is sensible just to put that sort of cut-off point so that if in the future any queries arise, then 9:30 is a fairly sensible time. Days do lengthen coming up now, so I would actually support that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Torshard. Just over to Councillor Billings.
Yeah, I think, Chair, just to reinforce that point and just to assist the applicant who's in the room, I'm one of the 2 local ward councillors for this ward. Paignton Villas football ground is also within my ward. They have regularly come to me for help and going forwards, and I would hope you would seek to do so the same. None of what I've been laying on the table is in any way designed to prevent things for the football club. It's more just to seek the continuation of a harmonious relationship between the residents locally and the activities that go on that site, in large part when perhaps sometime in the future we don't have such enthusiastic, responsible operators such as yourself, perhaps. That's where I'm coming from. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Over to Councillor Penny. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really struggled to be able to support it with that condition on, because it's just, you just come to it in such arbitrary fashion, plucked out those times out the air. I mean, earlier on a different item, to your credit, Councillor Billings, you were very robust on relying on what was in front of us, what was policy compliant, and so on and so forth. This feels a bit more like a shove it in at the last minute, and we think this feels right, when officers and professionals have been thinking about this for a long time, and came to the conclusion that actually the use of it will regulate itself due to the nature of the season. So it just seems, it doesn't feel like a good decision-making process just to come up with these times out of thin air. And that's why, respectfully, Councillor Billings, I will not be supporting it with this condition attached.
Thank you, Councillor Pentney. Councillor Cow.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to echo Councillor Pentney. It does seem a bit arbitrary. And looking at the, I think, 96 submissions on the application, 85 were in support, 11 objected. And having just had a quick glance at a couple of them, late night activities wouldn't have been mentioned in, well, even if it was in 11 of them, it's 11 out of the 96. I think it is ridiculous to put a condition on one parcel of land that is literally inches away from a parcel of land without condition. And if people are concerned about use, a lot of that use would be generating traffic movements, which would be more disruptive. So you can drive your car up to the car park up to the north pitch, but you can't actually go and use the southern pitch. I think it's unworkable. I think it's unreasonable. And to be honest, as David Edmondson has pointed out, probably unenforceable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cowell. Any more debate? No? Thank you. Yeah, Teresa, thank you.
Thank you. Can I just check with Councillor Billings? Obviously, you were clear that you wanted the two Section 106 amendments from the earlier approval. There was also mention of Condition 10, including the word screening. I wasn't sure if that also applied to this application.
Correct, it did, and so we've picked up the points that came from debate in relation to the last application, which was the return to agricultural use, the removal of the PD rights, and the inclusion of the word screening in. I believe it's still Condition 10 in this.
Are you happy with that? Thank you. Okay, I think we will go to the vote on that one. So all in favour? Thank you. We're voting on the latest amendment to the pitch further closest to the buildings. Thank you. Thank you. And those against?
That's 4, Chairman.
Thank you very much. That's carried. Thank you. I think, shall we take 5 minutes? Yeah. I think we'll take a 5-minute comfort break, so we will see everybody back here at about 15:15. Thank you. At the cafe at Oddicombe Beach. There are no registered speakers. But I do believe we do have a declaration of interest non-pecuniary. Councillor Darling.
Thank you. It dawned on me that as I rent a beach hut chalet at this location, it would be appropriate for me to declare an interest on this particular item. That's non-pecuniary interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Darling, and I believe you filled out the relevant paperwork. Thank you. Okay, please can I now introduce Mr Edmondson to introduce the application. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not Katie Greer, the planning officer. She is at university today, and so I've stepped in to present this one. But this is again for another successful entrepreneur and business down at Oddicombe. In Babacombe area. You can see on the screen an image of the restaurant cafe here. It's the Corinthian Sailing Club just behind, and boat storage as well behind the site. And the area indicated in red going around the outside is where the gazebo has been partially constructed. This application is only really in front of us today because it's on council land, and there were 2 objections. There have been 11 letters of support and 2 objections. And you can see in the Planning Committee report a couple of the reasons why the objections were received: impact on the local area, overdevelopment not in keeping with the area, privacy overlooking and sets a precedent, and access. Those were the comments just from a couple of local residents. So just going through the details, I'm sure you probably know where this site is, but right down on the waterfront. For some considerable time, there have been seats and tables put outside for customers to sit in front of the cafe and restaurant. This image shows the dotted area around here where the gazebo is now constructed. Constructed in white powder coated aluminium, so quite a decent structure, as we'll see some images of in a moment. And across that has the ability for a retractable sliding roof that comes across in inclement weather to be able to provide some protection there. It measures 3.6 metres high, about 16 metres in length across the front, and about 6.1 metres wide. On the next image, you'll see the area that's actually proposed to be covered by that area. And I think you'll see on this subsequent image some details of the structure itself. So it comes out on a horizontal section in front of the cafe and restaurant in this proposed area, just in front of the glaze, but it doesn't go as far as the takeaway facility at the very end. And the structure looks like this. And as you can see, it reads as quite lightweight. It's white in relation to the rest of the structure. And in that photograph there on the left-hand side, you can just see one section of the retractable roof that comes out when needed. The rest just defines that seating area really and allows people to wander in between, and maintains a section of walkway along the front before you get to the steps, between 1.7 and 2 metres, so definitely wide enough for a mobility scooter or wheelchair users. The arrangement is for this lease to be extended to be able to have this structure there for a period. The only bit of detail we haven't received was about the lighting potentially to be used, and so there's a planning condition proposed for that. And as you can see in the recommendation, also the need for a detailed flood risk assessment, which we've been handed today just before the meeting. So when it comes to the recommendation, I'll detail what we'll do with that now that it's been received. But in those other images there, you can see the area of some car parking in front before you get to the building itself. Then the structure, again, one image there showing that retractable roof pulled out, and then the width that there is before the steps area in front of the structure. Works did stop on the development once the applicant realised they needed planning permission, and this application has come forward in good time, but it is partly retrospective, as you can see. Some of the key issues: it's in flood zone. Well, the building's in flood zone 1, and the area that we're talking about now in flood zone 3, and hence why there was the need for a flood risk assessment. I've had a very brief look through it, and I'm content that some of the conclusions there talk about emergency egress routes, and also the way in which it will be dealt with on site were there to be a flood risk situation from a very high tide. But we will put that flood risk assessment in front of Dave Stewart, our advisor, and get some further advice on that before we go any further. But as you can see, it's within the core tourism investment area and near to the SSSI and marine conservation zone. And those are the other factors: impact on visual amenity, impact on residential amenity, impact on highway safety, ecology, biodiversity, flood risk and drainage. And the local plan policies are those listed on the screen there, quite a few that have been taken into account in terms of determining the application. And the neighbourhood plan policies, including the sustainable development and established architecture of the area. So the officer recommendation is that subject to the receipt of the flood risk assessment, which we've now got, and that demonstrates it is safe, which is what the conclusions are saying, but I would like to get confirmation of that, and with the conditions proposed in the report, that you give delegated authority to myself to be able to issue that permission subject to that confirmation and any other material considerations that may come forward. And the only other aside I would mention is I've been pushing to try and find out when the Cliff Railway will be open again, because I know how critical that is for this business, but also just for visitors to Oddicombe Beach itself. And we, in a senior leadership team this morning, I raised this, and I was told that early July is the proposed. I know there was some stuff on social media at the weekend, but that is the proposal, that it be reopening again in early July. And I know that will make a huge difference to the business and to the site here. But really, that's the recommendation for delegated approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edmondson. As previously mentioned, there are no speakers on this application, so I invite questions from members to the officers, please. Councillor Darling, thank you.
Thank you. They're running a minibus up and down there at the moment, just as of interest. But the flood risk, if there is a beast from the east, when I know that area got severely flooded at that time when the beast from the east happened, and it did ingress very heavily into that building. Part of their management plan, is it actually removing the structure? Otherwise, I imagine it may become levels of spaghetti.
There's no proposal to remove it in storm conditions, but clearly the activity won't be used there, and the roofs will be retracted back into the building to avoid any collapse. The structures are actually concreted into the promenade there.
Thank you. Are you happy with your answer, Councillor Darling? Thank you very much. Any other questions from members? Councillor Billings, thank you.
Have we got clarity exactly in your report, Mr. Edmondson, of the square footage or the square meterage that's going to be covered from this? I'm just thinking from the perspective of an alternative team within the council may wish to review the leaseholder arrangements, given the extra benefit to the applicant. Have we got clarity of exactly the area used, please?
It was 16 metres in length by 6.1 metres in width, so 96 metres squared. So yeah, I don't know. The negotiation over the rental values, I think, is outside of our remit today, but that is something to be considered. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. That answered the question.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Are there any other questions regarding this application? No? Well, in that case, I open for debate. Councillor Darling.
Thank you. I have declared an interest in this, but I do have an open mind on it. Clearly, one doesn't welcome to see retrospective planning applications, but despite that, one needs to have a look at them, you know, with a clear mind, despite it being retrospective. I would just welcome this application. It enhances a current business. It has respect for access to the promenade. I think those pictures where you could see the structure and the steps was extremely helpful to demonstrate that there was space for, where there was clearly space for access for wheelchair users or people with pushchairs, etc., to gain access there. So it isn't impacting too much on the promenade. It's only effectively covering the area that was already covered by seating, and it does lengthen the viability of this particular business. Elsewhere in this section, we're looking at a significant rebuild and enhancement of the Brixham Cricket Sailing Club. A member of, and I probably ought to declare an interest that I'm a member of the Brixham Cricket Sailing Club in retrospect, myself, which I will do afterwards. Therefore, I would encourage colleagues to support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Darling. Councillor Fox. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, I think it's a real shot in the arm for the tourism business that we all need to thrive in Torbay. I'm fully in support of it. And I think seeing the pictures on the screen, I'm really pleasantly surprised, because I thought the one downside might have been the design on it. I think the design, I think somebody used the words airy or light. I think it looks superb and is appropriate in scale, in design, in texture and everything. So very much in support.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Councillor Billings.
Yes, I would share those thoughts. Personally, I think we need to see developments such as this that allow greater use of tourism facilities in inclement weather. And I think this is exactly that. It's providing the applicant with a longer season in which they can reasonably expect to use their premises. I think that's something that our council needs to give weight towards in a tourism area where tourism provides valuable incomes and jobs for many of the families that we as a council look after this bay for. Looking at the actual proposal we have, I would agree, Councillor Fox. It is area and light. The eaves or ridge level of the proposal, I'm not quite sure the correct term here, given the fact we're looking at an open structure, does seem relatively high. It doesn't seem sort of in your face as you're walking along the promenade, and it still seems open. And I would hope that this committee would in the future see further applications come forward from this applicant for other proposals if they wanted to enhance their facilities. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Councillor Tolshard. Thank you.
Just at the risk of repeating what everybody else has said, actually. Yes, I fully I'm in support of it. It extends the hours and days that the facility can be used, and looking at those photos, it looks a bit wet there in the photograph, so hopefully it'll provide facilities for people to use what is, currently a seating area, but to be under cover. So yes, I think it's a very acceptable proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tolshard. Back to Councillor Billings and then Councillor Cow.
Just as a quick clarification point, in relation to the conditions, we are saying no internal or external lighting. Could we just get clarity within the committee? We're talking about no new lighting within the area that's being covered by this roof. We're not in no way, shape or form talking about the existing lighting within the building by that suggested wording. That wasn't the proposal or intention, was it?
No, and it's not also saying there will be no external lighting. It's only that we need to see the details of what that will be, so there isn't excessive light pollution or there are cowls pointing in the right direction to make sure it's focused on the area covered, but it doesn't affect the rest of the building.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cowell.
Thank you, Chair. And picking up Councillor Tolchard's observation, I do hope that it was raining and not the result of a very high tide. But again, just to reiterate the points, that it is an investment in tourism. And it's good to see that private investment coming in as part of our ambition to improve tourism in the Bay. I believe, and I'm sure I picked up on it somewhere in the report, that the defined area of that at Gazebo is already incorporated within the lease of the, I'm getting nods, is incorporated within the lease arrangements. I mean, the fact it's now got a temporary structure around it actually helps define the boundaries of the leased and operational area, and I guess that would be covered by licensing elsewhere in terms of pavement cafes or whatever else. And I think in terms of picking up the design, I did see one of the objectors, one of the two objectors, was stating that it was quite an imposing. I actually think because you can see through it, certainly on those images, and I know it's an incomplete structure. But in terms of its squareness, it actually reflects the nature of the building that it's bolted onto, and I think it complements it. So I'd say congratulations to the investors, and I'm happy to support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Cowell. Councillor Darling.
Thank you. Just very briefly on light pollution. The area already has significant lighting from the beach huts to the rear. I'm very much aware of this because I know when I'm landing on a nice dark evening in August and the cliffs are really well lit up. So if anything, we need to turn the existing lighting down or shelter it a bit compared to what there is, a hint of lighting that we may be seeing with this.
Thank you, Councillor Darling. Is there any more debate? Okay, thank you. Do we have a proposer on this application? Councillor Cowell.
Happy to propose as published, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cowell. Do I have a seconder?
We had 3 seconders.
Got 3.
I think it probably was Councillor Billings first.
Councillor Billings, thank you.
Yeah, yes, Madam Chair, I'm quite happy to second.
Thank you very much. Is there any debate on that? Okay, no debate. So if everybody's happy to go to the vote, we'll proceed. All in favour? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Thank you. So I do approve this application. Well, I think that just about wraps up this evening. Thank you all for attending this planning committee. The meeting is now closed. I look forward to seeing you all at the next meeting, and I do wish you all a safe journey home. Thank you.